Hello, folks. We are officially live. First of all, thank you so much for investing your time and being here today. So, now let me tell you something very honestly. So, we are living in a time where AI is not just the trend, it's completely shifting in how the world works. Correct? So, right now, if you see, organizations are not just asking, can we use AI? No, they are asking how fast we can able to implement an AI in a production. So that's exactly where most people are stuck. See, we all know AI, we all use AI. That doesn't help. But what happens, they have no idea how AI actually runs in a real world systems. And that gap is where careers are made. Okay, so here is the thing. Now listen very carefully. This is really important. See, AI job demands has exploded by 100% in last 2 to 3 years. But what happens? Companies are still struggling to find the right AI skills, right MLOps engineers. At the same time, roles are changing, not disappearing. See, even recent study shows AI is transforming the jobs more than replacing them. So, which means only one thing for you. Here is the thing. People who adopt AI grow massively. People who don't get replaced and left behind. That's the hardest truth. And here is another truth. You have two choices in the AI era. Either be someone who is replaced by AI or be someone who builds, deploys, and controls an AI system. And the truth is, as I mentioned already, do you want to be a creator of AI or do you want to be a consumer of AI? The truth is, the creator of AI will always have the power, right? And in today's session, let's go further. So in today's session, it's not going to be a theory. In next 3 hours, I'm going to show you how a real world AI systems are built and deployed, and exactly companies and what exactly companies are expecting from an MLOps engineers, and why 90% of ML projects fails without MLOps, and how you can position yourself in the top 1% of AI professionals in this world. Simple. But here is a deal. This is not for a casual learners, because towards the end of this particular session, I'm going to reveal a structured roadmap, let's say real project insights, and some exclusive opportunities and bonuses only for the folks who stay till end of this particular program. So if you leave in middle, you will miss the most valuable parts. So do this right now, right? Let's make a promise. Close all the distractions, put your phone on silence, and commit the next 3 hours for your future. Very simple thing, right? But because what you're about to learn today can literally change the directions of your career in next 6 to 12 months. Let's get started now. Perfect. So let's talk about me. Who is exactly this Sharad Kumar, right? Like, let me just turn on my camera for a few seconds. I believe, yes. Yeah, perfect. You can able to see me. Hey folks, yeah, this is Sharad from 𝐶 Technologies. So I will be your trainer, I will be your host, I will be your mentor, whatever you think, for this next 2 to 2.5 hours. So let's get started. So we are from an organization called 𝐶 Technologies. Anything that you imagine in terms of AI, generative AI, anything related to the cloud, we are definitely the best peoples outside in the market. There's no doubt about it. So anything related to AI. So personally, I have trained more than 5,000 plus working professionals, obviously, to make their strong career in their AI industry. So let me just help you for this next 2.5 hours, obviously, to know more about what is this MLOps is all about and how you can able to make your career into that. Okay, so let's get started without wasting much of a time. So I don't want to I will be turning off my camera. Maybe you don't want my face throughout this meeting. So let's get started. This will be the 3 highlights that we're going to revolve around for next 3 hours. So what is MLOps is all about and what it takes to master MLOps for you, and a career opportunities in MLOps for you to become a top 1% of AI professionals in this world. So let's get started. Perfect. Saying that, here we go. Yeah, obviously the beautiful picture. So how this picture is related to MLOps? Obviously, there is some relationship. But let me just ask some questions, folks. Yeah, let's see who is going to answer this right. Okay. So what do you think this picture is about? So what do you think you can find from this particular picture? I will give hardly a couple of seconds. Go ahead and try to describe this particular picture in your own way, how you can able to describe it. So what do you find in this picture? What kind of an objects do you think that you can able to recognize from this picture? So go ahead and use your chat window. Let's see who is going to answer it first, right? So here we go. The answers are pouring in. So let's see who is going to give the right answer, right? Obviously, a lot of people are saying it's a dog park, right? Jesus says it's a park. Vaishali says it's a park, right? Vaishali says, yeah, it's a park. Navin says, one fine day. What an awesome description, Navin. I love it. Perfect. So Sudhakar says it's a dark park. Vacation, Sudeep Kumar. Awesome. I like that. Okay, so obviously everyone we would like to spend our day in this particular program, isn't it? Picnic, Rohit, that's awesome. I love it, Rohit. Perfect. So we all know this is a picture of a park, right? So we know this is a beautiful picture of a park. Yeah, we would like to just spend the entire day over there. So we just want to let's do the work over there itself, right? So why do we need to sit in office? Anyway, so let's come to the topic. So we know this is a beautiful picture of a park. So we know there are a lot of trees and there is a path where we can walk. And so definitely there is a peoples. Yeah, there are humans. There is a men, there is a women, and there are dogs here. Obviously, there's a different breeds of dogs, right? And there's a dog which is carrying a ball in his mouth. Perfect. We know this is a beautiful picture of a park. Great, but that's not my question, honestly. So what is my question then? The question is, you all just mentioned it's a park, this is a dog, there's a grass, there's a tree, right? But my question is, how do you know this is a picture of a park? How do you know this is a picture of a dog? Who taught you this is a dog? Why can't this be an elephant or a lion? So why can't this be a maybe some kind of a giraffe? Yeah, we know it's a human, it's us. But question is, who taught you that, right? But let's proceed to the next slide. Let's see. Let's try to analyze that. Obviously, so here we have Jesu says object detection. Rohit says strength. That's awesome. Yeah, we are going too much technical. Perfect. Yes, we will do. So, but my question is a bit different. Let's say, what if we take the same exact picture, the beautiful picture that we had? So what if I go ahead and display this picture to this newborn baby? Do you think this newborn baby could able to recognize the same exact things that you could recognize right now? Could baby say this is a picture of a park, there's a dog, there's a man, there's a woman, there's a tree? Definitely not, right? So let's say consider that this baby is hardly 1 year old. So this baby could able to recognize a mother and father, but hardly the baby doesn't know anything else, right? But what if we go ahead and display the same exact picture maybe to the grown-up kid? So do you think this kid could able to recognize this a picture of a park? Definitely, right? When we ask, what is a picture? What is this picture? What do you know about this picture to these kids? They say, this is a picture of a park where I would like to play with my dog, right? With my ball and a bat or whatever it is, right? But what if I go ahead and show the same exact picture to these grown-up adults? I mean, I'm talking about you folks, right? So if I go ahead and display the picture, this picture to you, obviously you can give a very detailed description, isn't it? You can say this is a beautiful picture of a park. It's a fine day where I can spend my time over there with my dog, with my, maybe you have wife, your kids. What an awesome description you can give, right? So obviously, how this is really related to what we're talking about, machine learning or MLOps that I'm talking about, right? So obviously, what we today talk about, AI, which stands for artificial intelligence, right? So we are the examples of that, obviously, right? So obviously we are a biological machines. Yes. So we born with an empty brain. Logically, it's not empty brain, but we have some genes, etc. But what happens? We don't have a sense of a world, what the world looks like, etc. Right? So we started learning from our kid, right? We started learning from parents. They are the best teachers. Then we go for a school. I mean, we started walking. We started recognizing people. We started making friends. We started learning scripts, English, right? Hindi, maybe German, French, whatever it is, right? We started learning physics, chemistry, biology, right? So obviously then eventually we learn and we get better in that, right? So obviously in case if I'm putting the growth cycle of your entire human being, the knowledge that we learn eventually grows up, right? Each and every day we learn something and we get better in that, including today, isn't it? Yes, today, what are exactly you learning? Obviously, you're learning how you can be part of the world AI industry, how you can able to rule this world by using our learning AI, right? So obviously we are talking about how you can able to position yourself into AI industry in terms of MLOps. So that's what exactly we are learning today. And again, so the magic is by learning so much data, so much things, you can able to make a decisions for yourself, isn't it? You can able to make a predictions. You can able to predict what's going to happen in the future, what you need to take an action, because you so far took an action to stay till end of this program. I believe you might, but obviously we could able to make a decisions. We could able to predict what's the best, what I can do. You can make a predictions. Yes. So that is nothing but what we are today talking about AI, right? So just imagine the way we are learning a data and way we could able to get better in that particular data. So today what human beings are trying to replicate, the same exact things what we have learned, right? The same data that we have learned, right? So we are trying to teach this dumb machines. Yes, as simple as that. Yes. Hardly this machines understand zeros or ones, right? Just this machines understands numbers, right? So today we are using these machines, computers, CPUs, GPUs, whatever it is, what are the different kind of machines that we're talking about. So we are trying to teach the same exact data, right, to these machines, and we want these machines to make decisions behalf of us. We want these machines to make some predictions, generate some content, what we call it as generative AI for an example, right? So let's talk about a very simple example, isn't it, today, right? Let's get started. Let's say when I'm talking about AI, AI stands for the final end product, artificial intelligence, right? ChatGPT is an AI, right? So, so today we are using a lot of AI systems, AI projects throughout our life. We're using ChatGPT, you're using a lot of AI services within your mobile phones, from your emails, etc., right? So we know it's all about taking the huge amount of data, the data that we have already learned, we are teaching the same exact data to these machines. Let's talk about a very simple example. Let's say I'm going to take some some CSV file. Let's say I have some CSV file. Okay, it can be any kind of a data. I have CSV file here. Great. What kind of a data I have in the CSV file? Let's say I have a 3 years old data of my electricity consumption of my home. Let's say you have a home, you have an office, whatever it is. Let's say I put a lot of sensors in your home. I collect amount of electricity that you consume. Let's say how much electricity your washing machine, water geyser, any electrical and electronic appliances that you have in your home, right? So I collect all this data. So what we call it as historical data, right? So let's imagine I have around 30,000 data points in it. Okay, I have around 30,000 data points to 30,000 rows that I'm talking about. So what is next? I'm going to take this data. I'm going to teach this data to a machine. A machine can be a CPU, it can be a GPU, or it can be any high-end server that you can find in a cloud. It can be your own PC, or it can be edge devices like this. Okay. So the goal is simple. I want to teach this data to a machine. So where we are learning the data. So what these machines are going to learn? So these machines are going to learn the pattern from that particular data. What do you mean by pattern? Let's say I have around 3 years old data, right? So this data has a patterns in how you consume an electricity. Let's say this data has an information like how your electricity consumption looks like in spring, in summer, maybe in a monsoon, right? So what happens here, your machine tries to learn that pattern and it produces something called machine learning model. Yep, a model is, just imagine some kind of a brain. It has all the knowledge of your data. So this machine learning model is going to be part of final end product that you're talking about. It's not an end product, but it's going to be part of final end product, right? So let's talk about a different use case, right? So now we have this machine learning model. Okay. So now what I can do with this machine learning model? So I can ask this machine learning model to make some simple forecast. I can ask this machine learning model, can you just help me to predict what will be my electricity bills going to look like for the next 6 months, right? So obviously this machine learning model can able to help you make a predictions saying that how your first month bill is going to look like, second month bill, blah, 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 how the 6 months bills are going to look like. So machine learning model that you're trying could able to predict what bills probably you might pay for the next 6 months. So this can be one of a use case, right? Or let's think about some other different use cases. Let's say we talk about something called computer vision. So let's say I will take bunch of pictures of cats, bunch of pictures of dogs. So I will teach the difference between a cat and a dog to my machine. So then again, we will produce a machine learning model. This model has an information how the cat looks like and how a dog looks like. Okay. So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a camera in front of my machine. So then I'm going to put a cat in front of my machine. Let's imagine this is a cat. Yeah, a quite beautiful cat. So now what's going to happen? My machine learning model is going to produce an output saying that there is a cat which is standing in front of your door. So maybe you have a dog which is standing in front of your door. So what we're calling it as computer vision, right? Otherwise, let's talk about obviously the hottest topic today. What we're talking about, generative AI, right? We call it as Gen AI or generative AI, ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is a product. But what is this generative AI, right? So let's say consider that I want to create my own generative AI model. So when I'm talking about generative AI today, we talk about a lot of different kind of machine learning models. A machine learning model which generates a text, right? We are talking about text to text models. So there are text to image models, right? If you input a text which can able to generate what we're talking about images. If you input a text, a models can able to generate a videos. If you input a text, a model can generate an audios. Endless, isn't it? Yes. So generative AI models are, again, they are what we call it as, again, they are kind of machine learning models. Hardly we are talking about they are deep learning models. Let's say if you want to train this large language models or generative AI models, say consider that an organizations like OpenAI, right? Just imagine to create a large language model, what we're calling it as LLM, right? Which is a text generation model. Just imagine, for a reason we call it as LLM, because it's called large language models. Why we call it as large? Because it's been trained with a huge amount of data in the internet. Just imagine OpenAI might have literally scrapped the complete internet. I mean, they might have got the amount of data. Just imagine amount of data that you can get from Wikipedia, amount of data they can get it from public forums, maybe from books, scanned books, maybe from GitHub. Just imagine how much data they can get. They might have trained a machine learning model. So now this machine learning models understands how to generate a text and how to answer your questions. So now you go ahead and ask any question. So can you tell me a bedtime story for my kids? It does the job. It go ahead and generates a text for you, right? So what we today calling it as generative AI. So we do understand so what it takes to build what is exactly a machine learning is all about, right? So it's all about taking bunch of data that you have, and we go ahead and teach this data to a machine. A machine can be a computer, CPU, GPU, anything, and this machine understands a pattern from this data, and you can able to use this machine learning model to generate an output, right? What are the problems that you can able to solve? Just imagine there are endless of use cases that you can solve today in the organizations. But what is the question? But the question is, okay, what is MLOps but, right? So let's get started. Let's try to understand what's a typical workflow would look like for creating a successful machine learning model. What do you mean by that? So machine learning model is part of a job here, which we are talking about, which is going to be part of final end product, but there are a lot of processes attached within it, right? So let's try to understand what does a typical workflow look like, right? A step-by-step approach would look like to create a minimal workflow for creating a machine learning model. So here I'm talking about what is a typical workflow, right? So not the complete end-to-end, but as a minimal bare prerequisites, right? In order to deploy your models to the production, to put your AI into the production. So let's say we are talking about what? How you put your AI into the plates of your customer, right? That's where MLOps comes. We'll discuss in detail. Okay, now here is a quite simple example. So we do understand, like, a best example of AI is us, right? So you remember that. So you just think, let's say we consume data in many different ways, isn't it? Correct? So consider that we consume a data through our eyes, right? Right now you're seeing my screen, you're consuming visually what is there in front of my screen. That's a one way of consuming a data. And let's say we're talking about, yeah, so you can able to hear, isn't it? Hello, hello, hi. Yeah, you can able to hear my voice, isn't it? Yes, you're consuming a data through our ears, right? So that's a one form of you consuming data. So we can consume a data through smelling things, right? So you can smell what's happening in your kitchen. Probably most of you folks might be in your home. So maybe someone in your home might be preparing a biryani, whether it's a Delhi biryani or a Hyderabad biryani. So we could able to classify that, right? So by touching things, by feeling things, you can consume a data. So in similar fashion, let's say a machine can also consume a various different forms of data. So consider that your data can be in the form of pictures. It can be documents like CSV file or a JSON or text document that we're talking about, right? So what is the workflow here? So how do we build this AI? What's the steps? Obviously, the first step is getting the raw data. Okay, so then comes the next step in a workflow, what we call it as a data preparation. So what is data preparation? Yeah, so data preparation is, if I want to give a best example for data preparation, is something what's happening in your kitchen right now. So what we do in a kitchen, let's say, if you want to prepare your favorite recipe of your food, right? So let's say you want to prepare biryani for an example. So what we do, first we go to the market, isn't it? We go ahead and bring some vegetables. We buy a lot of spice. Maybe you might buy some meat, etc. So then what we do, we come back to our home. We started cleaning those vegetables and meat, whatever it is. Then we put some oil. We started putting ingredients, and we started preparing a favorite recipe of a biryani that you want to cook, isn't it? So similar to that, when we are talking about the first step, what we call it as data preparation is similar to that. See what happens, a raw data which is coming from your customers, the raw data will have a lot of garbages in it. So the data might not be clean. So we need to clean the data. So you might be having a CSV file. Just imagine some of the rows in your CSV file would be empty. It hurts your machine when you're teaching empty data. So what we do here, this is where we are talking about someone called data engineers or data scientists comes into the picture, who take this data, they clean it, they prepare it, they transform it. Right? So this is where a data preparation is about. So then comes, we are talking about something called experimentation, right? So what do you mean by experimentation, right? So what happens in the next step? So we will be using an IDs like, let's say it can be a Jupyter notebooks or VS Code. So we are aware about these IDs, right? So this is where someone called data scientist comes into the picture. So they write a lot of code here. So what do you mean by writing a code? So obviously, so let's say what is a goal? At the end of the day, we want to take bunch of data and I want to teach this data to a machine, right? So obviously I need to specify where is my data is coming from, whether your data is coming from your PC, whether it's coming from some cloud storage, some databases. So, and again, then comes what? The goal is to teach this data to a machine. A machine can be a CPU, whether it is a GPU, you need to specify that. That's why here comes your data scientist. They go ahead and use these IDEs. They mention everything in a code, right? So once they started executing the code, they do something called experimentation. So have you wondered why data scientist has been called as a data scientist anytime? See, who will, so consider for what kind of a people we do call them as scientist? Someone who does experiments, right? Someone who does an experiments in a lab, but data scientist does an experiments in his laptop. That's a difference. So because what, let's say that the concept of taking a data and teaching a data to a machine is what we call it as an experiment, because your data scientist, they cannot come up with the best quality model in a one single shot. So what they do experimentation. So they go ahead and do multiple trials and errors. Basically, we're talking about experiment number 1, experiment number 2, experiment number n. They might conduct multiple different experiments in order to come up with the best quality ML model, a model which can give the good results for you, right? Not the fake results, right? So data scientist conducts various different experiments. And now let's imagine they come up with the best version of a model. That means they have first version of a model. What happens next? Here comes what we call it as model registries. Okay, so what is this model registries? How this model registry is going to help us? So model registries are basically a tools that helps you to manage the different versions of your machine learning models. What do you mean by that? See, consider that throughout the life cycle of you building a machine learning models, so you don't produce only one version of a model. Do you think we will produce only one version of a model? No, we do produce multiple different versions of models, right? So in order to manage these different versions of models, there are dedicated tools. We call it as model registries. So in this model registries, we can go ahead and version different versions of models. Great. So then what? So now I have a model, whether the job is done. No, next step, we talk about deployment. So this is where we want to take the best performing model. Let's say we have version 1. So now I want to go ahead and deploy this model to the production. So what do you mean by deploying this model to the production? See, consider that every organization might have different requirements, where they want to deploy the models might vary. Someone who want to deploy the models on top of AWS cloud, Azure cloud, GCP cloud into Dockers, there is something called Kubernetes, a serverless, right? So here is an example. Let's say I'm deploying my models into Docker infrastructure. Let's say I deploy my first version of a model. So then comes obviously the final piece of a puzzle. We are talking about your developers, your front-end developers, right? Someone who is going to create a client-side application, right? Someone, they're going to build web services. It can be in web apps, it can be in Android apps. So where we can go ahead and access this deployed models through this web applications, for an example, right? So this is how the typical workflow looks like. A bare minimal prerequisites, but this is not enough. There's a more automation that you need, right? So we do understand what is machine learning is all about right now. So machine learning is all about studying about complex algorithms, complex mathematical models. We teach these complex mathematical models to your computers where they improve progressively on the specific task, right? So it's all about teaching some complex math. And once your machine understands a complex math, it can able to make some decisions and predictions for your future. And we do understand. So let's say this is where your data scientist comes into the picture. They use data scientists or data engineers. They use various different programming languages to build the model, right? It can be Python, JavaScript, C, C++. So you can use various different programming languages today. So this is a side of understanding what is machine learning, but still the question is unanswered. So what is MLOps? Saying that, let's get started with our program. Let's try to understand what is MLOps is all about. So MLOps stands for machine learning operations. Yes, as we're talking about, MLOps comes under the operation side of an AI, right? So how do you put your AI to the plates of your customer? That's what exactly MLOps is all about, putting in a very simple term. Let's get started. Let's discuss about that. Okay, here we go. So before we go ahead and understand what is MLOps is all about, definitely learning a random technology outside of the market doesn't help, doesn't make sense, right? So if you go ahead and, let's say if you're going to learn a quantum technology today, quantum technology doesn't have its own career, right? As of right now, right? But we are talking about machine learning or AI, MLOps, it does. But understanding what is the current state, right? Understanding what exactly every organization in this world is heading towards. So understanding that would make sense, right? Then only you can able to take an action. That's what exactly this slide is about. So let's discuss about what's actually every organization is doing, right? So we are talking about last decade, today, and what's going to happen end of this year or maybe a couple of next years that we're talking about, right? So let's go back to last 10 years ago, right? So yeah, here we go. Maybe you can come out of your home. I have a time travel machine waiting for your, waiting near your home, door. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Let's go back to last 10 years ago. So let's do some time travel. Let's try to understand what every organizations are doing last 10 years ago. I'm talking about, let's say before 2015, right? So you consider that every IT organizations has had a lot of data sitting in their databases, storage platforms. They have a lot of data. But you know what they started doing? They started building what we call it as machine learning models last 10 years ago, before that. But the problem is they are building models, but they are not operationalizing that models. What do you mean by operationalizing? They're not getting their models to the plates of their customer. That means they are not making any money. They are not deploying their models to the production, right? It's not solving anyone's problem. Basically, they are experimenting. So that's the situation of last 10 years, right? They're not operating. That means last 10 years ago, there's no, what we're talking about, more MLOps jobs. There are, but not more. But let's talk about today. And let's talk about end of this year. So already there are 53% of organizations, they have transformed their POCs. I mean, the models they are building to the production already, right? So for an average, it takes around 9 months for every organization to reach to that particular position. And you will notice almost end of this year, we are already in the end of this year, you will see that 75% of organizations, they already transformed they have started transforming their POCs into production. So what do you mean by that? 75% of organizations, they started shifting their models to the production. But the question is, what it takes to move your model or operationalizing your model. So you need some kind of an automation. That's what exactly we call it as MLOps, right? So probably you might have heard about something called DevOps for a simple comparison. So DevOps and MLOps are completely different. Obviously, we'll talk about it. But you know, DevOps is all about building an automation to deliver your software to the production, right? There is someone called software developer. You know that he is someone who writes a lot of code. And there is someone called DevOps engineers who take that software, they build it, test it, pack it, and they deliver it to the production. So that's for the software. And today, every organizations are trying to productionizing AI. So is that true? Do you believe it? No. Yes, obviously, right? So you tell me what we hear more about more in your tech, obviously in your offices, what your colleagues talks about, what Instagram, tech blogs talks about. What every organization is doing is AI, right? Every organization is trying to implement AI into their organization, whether they're coming from technical or non-technical background. That means AI is trying to reach all the corners of this world. Great. But who actually helps every organization to put AI into the plates of their customer across the world? Someone called MLOps engineers. MLOps is all about building an automation, right? So let's discuss what is MLOps is all about. So MLOps is a practice. It's a collaboration and communication between, let's say, different stakeholders who are part of building these AI projects. Who is part of building AI projects? We're talking about data scientists, operational professionals, which we are talking about an MLOps engineers, data engineers. There are a lot of people. Data engineers are there, data scientists is there, MLOps engineers are there, right? So the collaboration and communication between them. So when we are talking about implementing this MLOps practices, could able to increase the quality and simplify the management process of how your organization is building, training, evaluating, and deploying your models to the production. So deploying means putting your AI to the plates of your customer, as simple as that. So MLOps is all about learning how to build an automation to deliver any kind of a machine learning model to the production. So it can be any classical machine learning models to what we're talking about, deep learning models. What do you mean by that? So it can be any computer vision models or deep learning models that we're talking about, like Gen AI models to the production. That's where MLOps comes into picture. So now you know who puts AI into the plates of your customer. It's nothing but MLOps engineers. right? So let's get started. Let's try to understand what is this MLOps motivation looks like in a high level view, right? So when we're talking about MLOps as a discipline that sits intersection between, let's say, various different domains in the organization, right? So it's basically, let's say, the intersection between what we call it as machine learning, yes, DevOps and data engineering. So what we have MLOps, the mixture of, yeah, 2 plates of machine learning, 3 plates of DevOps, and 5 plates of data engineering. Oh, here we go. You have an MLOps. Yep, as simple as that. So as we're talking about, let's say, this intersection of practices when they're coming together, it really drives a value in how we build, deliver, and manage your machine learning models. So obviously, if any organization want to implement such kind of a discipline without having the right people's right technology and right process in a place, you cannot implement MLOps practices, right? So saying that, first, let us do one thing. Let's go ahead and understand what are the challenges in implementing MLOps first of all, right? Let's get started. Let me have some water. Okay, let's talk about, let's say we know that in the process of we creating and managing a machine learning workflows, we definitely ran into a lot of different challenges, right? So we know that machine learning model building involves multiple steps like data preparation, model training, model evaluation. So let's try to understand what we do in these individual steps. But the problem is not only we have these steps, there really lot goes into, let's say, stitching things, different things together. Say I want to stitch data preparation to model training to model deployment, right? For an example, let's say we'll get started with data preparation. So what we do in a data preparation? So in a data preparation job, right? So this is where we have a steps might contain, let's say, one to many tasks, like taking a raw data from your customers and eventually transforming this data into training data and testing data. We split the data. We don't teach all the data to a machine. No. Then how do you test your machine? So we keep some data aside and we teach maximum data to your machine, and we use that testing data, what we call, which we kept it aside to test your machine. That's what exactly we do in a data preparation. So splitting a data. So then comes in a model training step. So model training step might have some additional steps inside your training process. So whether you're doing a single model training or whether you might be doing some different experiments, we talked about what data scientist does, experimentation, right? Hyperparameter tuning, because you cannot come up with the best quality model in one single shot. So you will be going ahead and performing what we call it as hyperparameter tuning. So once we're done with data preparation, so here your data scientist does different experiments. He might come up with different versions of model. Then he decides, okay, the best performing model, and that could be the model which goes to the production. So now let's talk about what we do in the model deployment step. In a model deployment step, you might have only one step in a workflow, or it could have many tasks underneath it, obviously. Let's say for an example, once you have your machine learning model, which is part of final end product, okay, so then we will go and deploy it to the production. No, we don't do that. So we might have different environments where we want to deploy the model, whether you want to deploy your model to the staging environment, whether you want to deploy your model to the production environment. Even though when you're deploying these models to different environments, maybe you need some additional control inside where you are deploying these models. So perfect. Let's talk about. So now I have the first version of a model. Perfect. So now in order to deploy this model, first I will go ahead and deploy this model to what we call it as a staging environment. A staging environment is an exact copy of production, but it is not production. But this is where I deploy my first version of model. Okay, we deploy to staging for whom? Obviously, this is for your internal team, right? So what happens, your internal team, maybe you're a bunch of data scientists, bunch of MLOps engineers, they go ahead and do further testing. They see how this model is working, whether it is working as per data scientist interpretations. If data scientists or MLOps engineers, are they satisfied with the quality and the performance of a model in a staging environment? If they're satisfied, then we will go ahead and deploy the same version of model to the production. So now once I deploy this model to the production, this is where I put my model to the plates of your customers, where they can able to started using your models. They can get benefited for that. So yes, we deploy the models to different environments. So not just this, but I need some additional control, right? I just don't want to deploy this model directly to the production. So maybe I need some approval process, right? So let's say this is where, let's say if you want to go ahead and deploy this model to the staging environment, or you want to deploy this model to what we call it as a production environment, I just don't go ahead and directly deploy it. So let's say once your model is ready to be deployed, so here comes maybe some senior MLOps folks or senior data scientist folk. He come and just check the quality of a model that you have trained. He will check your job. And if he is satisfied with the quality of a model, so then he will be go ahead and clicking this approval button, which go ahead and deploys the model to staging as well as a production environment. So there are a lot of different steps. There are a lot of different dependencies has to work together, right? To ultimately build this and build out something that provides, let's say, iteration across the life cycle. And more than that, and to provide what we call it as an end-to-end traceability, right? To track the models that you have trained in a, let's say, model development environments, and where are you deploying, whether you're deploying it to a staging environment or production environment, right? So we need to have end-to-end traceability, which we are talking about monitoring, right? So as an MLOps engineers, you'd be just not focusing on building an automation here. You'd be also focusing on monitoring this entire infrastructure. Yes, as an MLOps engineer, you'd be also focusing on, yes, deploying the infrastructure as well. So you will be deciding what kind of infrastructure an organization needed. You deploy the infrastructure, you create an automation, and you also monitor the entire infrastructure, the models that you have built, etc. Right? So these are some major challenges that we do have, right? So saying that, let's get started now. Obviously, sometimes, let's say you might have heard about DevOps, definitely. But the question is whether DevOps and MLOps are they same? They're not, but there are some similarities. That's what exactly we're talking about. So far, we discussed about the MLOps challenges, right? So we do have some similarities, right? So the way we have a challenges in operationalizing your machine learning models has some common things comparing with your software production as well. Software production, I mean, we are talking about DevOps. In DevOps, we use, let's say, techniques like CI/CD practices, source and version control practices. So those practices are pretty much common in MLOps as well. Yes. So we use the same kind of CI/CD tools, source and version control tools for MLOps as well. But okay, here we go. But you know, a lot of times the CI/CD tools, we'll talk about CI/CD. So a lot of times, the CI/CD tools are not necessarily built for machine learning separately. So the way we use CI/CD pipelines, our source version control tools, will be different in MLOps. So in reality, what happens, you might use some different combinations of tools and integrations. Sometimes there might be some purpose-built data preparation tool, model training tool, and model deployment tool. So, all this, so all these steps can be complicated and challenging to stitch different things together. And more complicated than this, there is no a golden pipeline that you can follow. So what do you mean by there is no golden pipeline that you can follow? Consider that if I draft you the architecture right now, right? So not every organization, they cannot follow that same workflow, the architecture, the methods that I suggest, because it, requirements for technical implementation for your organizations can be different. Your organization structure can be different. The tools you might need to use might be vary. Maybe there is an organization who want to use AWS, someone want to use Azure, there some organizations want to use GCP. And there might be organizations who don't use any cloud. They want to use open source tools, right? And there might be organizations who might use multi-cloud, right? So saying that, so now let us try to understand what is so much common here. The steps and core components that I'm going to recommend throughout this program or throughout our MLOps specialization program will be same across different machine learning workflows, right? So let's talk about few here. We are talking about source and code versioning, tracking and versioning your data, model artifact versioning, and model versioning. What do you mean by that? See, in order to get started, in order to get some good idea about MLOps, why don't we discuss about the story? Yeah, not a bedtime story, but so yeah, a very interesting story. Let's discuss about that. 1 second, let me have some water. Let's do one thing. Let's go back to 2020. Yeah, again, we'll do some time travel. Let's go to year 2020. Okay. Let's see, who are we going to meet in 2020? In 2020, we're meeting someone called data scientist. What he does. So obviously, a data science here in 2020, this data scientist is actually building a machine learning model for theater owners, right? I'm talking about theater owners where we go out and watch a movie, right? So, but what this data scientist has done, he has not implemented any kind of MLOps practices, no automation, no monitoring, nothing. right? So here comes the thing, right? So let's say, but this particular data scientist has promised this particular client saying that this model is going to completely work fine for next 3 years without any problem, right? That's what exactly the client has, I mean, the data scientist has promised to the client. But what happened? This model got failed in next couple of months, right? So what could be the problem? Because you know what we're talking about, this is a year of 2020. What happened in 2020, right? So you know that's the year. So basically where COVID hit the market, definitely, right? So what happened when the COVID hit the market? What happens? Here comes, let's say, the behavior of your customers started changing, right? So at the end of the day, your customers are your data, right? So what happens? People who are going for theaters to watch movie, they gradually stop going for theaters, gradually, not immediately. So here, for that particular reason, the model actually failed. So here comes the major problem. A data scientist couldn't able to monitor the performance of a model. So for that particular reason, the model got failed, right? So this is, and then comes, let's say we are talking about, let's say what happened during the COVID and post COVID as well, right? So let's say what happened during the COVID, right? During the, let's say COVID, we had a lockdown, right? So during the lockdown, we completely stopped going for theaters, right? But you know what happened during the COVID lockdown? We started watching more movies. Going for theaters has been stopped completely, but we watching movies got increased. Why? You know, because of OTTs. So a lot of OTT platforms are skyrocketed at that time. There are new OTTs born at that time. So we started subscribing to all the kind of OTTs because we have a lot of time to spend. We started watching more movies. And you know what happening today? Let's forget about COVID. Let's talk about today. So what's happening today? So, you know, there is a small, let's say there is a small number of, I mean, there is a drop in small number of people who are going for theaters every day. I mean, so we don't go for theaters very regularly today because if I wait for next 13, let's say 15 to 30 days, I can watch the same exact movie in a OTT, like Netflix or whatever it is, right? So you can see there is a changes in the customer behavior, right? Your customers are your data. The biggest problem is here the data scientist didn't monitor the quality of a model that he has deployed in a production, right? I'm not talking about just monitoring the model, the complete infrastructure he might have deployed, right? So that could be the reason, one of the reason why the model has been failed in a production, right? So then comes, we did talked about, let's say, a three different behavior of your customers, right? So your customers are your data at the end of the day. So during COVID, let's say before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID, let's say we are talking about three different behaviors of your customers, correct? So what happens here? So that means there is a changes in your customer behavior. And again, you have a three different versions of your data, right? Before COVID and during COVID and after COVID. So here comes your data scientist didn't use any kind of data versioning tools in order to version a data. Yes. You might have heard about source and code versioning. Yes, like GitHub, you might have heard about it. So those are the tools. Still, we do use it in MLOps as well to version your source code, to version your infrastructure as a code. Yes, but we do use dedicated tools for versioning a data. So there are dedicated tools that we can use. So like DVC for an example, Git large files, something on AWS, something on Azure. And then comes, so we do understand that throughout the life cycle of building any machine learning projects, we don't produce only one version of a model. We produce different versions of machine learning models. So again, so this is where it is mandate to use what we call it as model registries. So model registries are dedicated tools that we can able to use it today to version your machine learning models. You have version 1, version 2, n number of versions. We use those model registries. If I want to give one example, MLflow as something on Amazon SageMaker in AWS or in Azure or in GCP, right? So these are some of the challenges that we're talking about similar to DevOps. And we know that MLOps and DevOps are completely different, but we do have some common things, but those common things are the way we use those tools are completely different. So saying that, can we get started with the second highlight that we need to discuss? You know that you made a promise till staying till end of discussing about 3 highlights here, right? So now we are getting started with discussing about second highlight. Okay, we do understand what is MLOps. It's all about building an automation to deliver any kind of an AI to the production. But how do you master in that? Let's discuss about that. So in order to master MLOps, let's discuss about MLOps components. So what do you mean by MLOps components here? So what is the approach? What is the strategy in order to go ahead and build a model and deploying this to the production? Obviously, we are talking about first cases, use case discovery, right? This is where an organization figure out, okay, the first thing that we need to understand, AI is not the hammer for all the different kind of problems you can solve. First, they need to figure out they have valid use case or not. So then come the second step is where data engineering comes into the picture. So you need a data, isn't it, to train these models, huge amount of data. So for that, we need a data engineers are basically someone who brings the data, right, to the data pipelines. So then comes the third step. This is where we build what we call it as a machine learning pipelines and automated pipelines, which actually makes this machine learning model. And fourth step, what we're talking about, production deployment. Yes, this is where we go ahead and deploy your models to the production. I mean, to put your AI to the plates of your customer. Then comes what? The fifth step, production monitoring, monitoring your complete infrastructure. So let's say if we are getting started, the first thing is obviously understanding a business, right? So whether you have a real problem statement that you can solve, right? You do use case identification. So you do the data understanding. What do you mean by data understanding? So whether you have an access to data. So, and can you able to harvest more data for your future, right? So then comes you do conduct all this feasibility studies. So that's the first step. So then comes we get started with data engineering here. So this is where, let's say, we do conduct what we call it as data preparation. So we discussed about what is data preparation already, right? So where we go ahead and clean and prepare your data, transform your data. So then comes what? We pick an algorithm. We learn about algorithms. So when we're talking about building a machine learning model involves the, let's say, the very important step, picking up the right algorithm which is needed, which will be done by your data scientist. So this is where we pick different algorithms like TensorFlow, Apache MXNet, sklearn. There are different frameworks that is available to build these models. So once we have picked the model algorithms, then we get started with model building and training exercise. So what we do here. So this is where we go ahead and start teaching the data to your machines, as simple as that. And we know that your data scientist cannot come up with the best quality ML model in a one shot. He does something called model experimentation. So he go ahead and does multiple iterations, experiment number one, experiment number two, etc., until he gets the best quality ML model. So we need to track all these different experiments that he is conducting. Then comes the model evaluation step. So what do you mean by model evaluation step? What we do here? See, how do you know that this is a best performing model? How do you know this is a fit model to be deployed to the production? There should be some kind of a scores. There should be some kind of a metrics that we can see that, right? So this is where in a model evaluation step, so this is where we evaluate a quality of a model. So based on a quality of a model, so here we generate a different kind of scores. So based on this scores, your data scientist decides whether it's a fit model can be deployed to the production or not. So then comes here we go ahead and plan for model serving. So where we can go ahead and deploy this model, packing the model, right? So then comes the next step. This is where we go ahead and deploy this model to the production. So that means you have your customers who can able to start using the models, right? And then we go ahead and automate it, everything. So this is where we go ahead and operate it continuously, and we use this monitoring tools in order to monitor your model and the complete infrastructure that you have built. And then we go ahead and learn the lessons from that monitoring jobs, and we keep on optimizing, right? As an MLOps engineer, your duty to go ahead and stitch each and every step together here. So that's what exactly we call it as an automation. So saying that, now let's discuss about the big D important step, important slide. So obviously this is what exactly what we're talking about, automated ML pipelines versus CI/CD ML pipelines. So there are two different ways how you can able to build an automation, right? So we are talking about building an automated ML workflows versus completely incorporated CI/CD pipelines. So today you can also see a lot of organizations, they are moving from automated ML workflows to completely incorporated CI/CD pipelines. So what do you mean by automated workflows? So that means we focus on the initial steps of creating and deploying your machine learning model. So this is where we bring the data, we do data pre-processing. Once the data is ready, we go ahead and teach this data to a machine, what we call it as model training. Then we finally go ahead and deploy this model to the production. So obviously, it adds more advantages once your organizations are moving into completely incorporated CI/CD pipelines. Obviously, before we go ahead and discuss about completely incorporated CI/CD pipelines, there is a term that we use in organization. So we call it as MLOps maturity stack or MLOps maturity level in your organization. So what do you mean by that? See what happens, not every organization on a day one, they implement complete automation. So everyone would start from level 0. Level 0 is basically no automation, right? But once an organizations are going to level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So level 4 is what we call it as a complete automated retraining pipelines. So level 3 has less automation than level 4. Level 2 has less automation than level 3 and level 1, for an example, right? So here, what kind of an automation that is required for your organization? So, and again, deciding that, and again, that will be managed by your MLOps engineer. So this particular slide, which actually gives an example for a level 4 architecture project, right? So let's go ahead and discuss about that. So what it takes to build a level 4 architecture project. So there are multiple projects that we'll be building throughout this particular program in terms of level 4 architecture project. Obviously, what is the first step? The first foremost step, identifying the use case. We discussed about already, your organization will identify the use case. Let's imagine, okay, now we have a use case to get started. The first step in a workflow is obviously bringing the data to your organization. So we already understand the importance of data versioning. Your data will definitely have versions we discussed about in a story. And this is where we will go ahead and integrate data versioning tools, a dedicated data versioning tools. If I want to give a couple of examples, there is something called DVC, data version control, or let's say we call it as Git large files. AWS has their own tool, Azure has their own tool, GCP has their own tool that you can able to use it to version your data. So then comes the next step in a workflow. We are talking about data pre-processing step. So this is where a data engineer or data scientist comes into the picture. So what we do in a data pre-processing. So data pre-processing is all about cleaning your data, right? Preparing and transforming your data, for an example, right? So what we do here. So here comes your data scientists or data engineers. They write a lot of code, maybe Python, not MLOps engineers. Don't worry. You are not someone who is going to build these models. So basically, MLOps engineers are someone who is going to stitch all these things together, right? So your data engineers or data scientists, they write a lot of code. And again, we discussed about importance of code repositories. Definitely we use the code repositories here to manage your source code. So source code, it can be data pre-processing source code or model training source code, or it can be the source code. As an MLOps engineer, you would be writing an ML scripts in order to manage the infrastructure. We also use the same code repositories for that. So then comes a model building step. In a model building step, again, here comes your data scientist. They write a lot of code, and this code will be again versioned on top of code repositories. So then comes a step where we started model training. So this is where we started feeding a data to a machine, and where we want to train the machine learning model. So this is where we call something called feature stores as well. So what do you mean by feature stores? Obviously. So what do you think we teach to a machine? For a machine, we teach features. For an example, we'll talk about the same example, right? So let's say we are actually trying to build a machine learning model, which is going to predict an electricity bills. So my data set might look like this. I might have a voltage, I might have a current, I might have power, I might have bills that you might have paid for the last couple of years. So this is my data set. So voltage is a feature, current is a feature, power is a feature, and bills are what we call it as target. So I want to teach this data, and I want my machine to predict my future bills, what I'm talking about, right? So that's a use case. So what happens, a feature store is something what we call it as a schema repository. It's not a database. So this feature store will manage these features. So what kind of a feature you have, voltage, current, power, what the data type it is, whether it's an integer, whether it's a float. So basically a feature store is basically a schema repository which manages the right schema. And again, we can able to version different schemas. So by using feature store, by using these features, we fetch the data through data versioning tools, for an example. So then what we do, we started training a machine learning models. Then what happens? What is the output of model training? After we train the machine data to a machine, you get what we call it as machine learning model, which is part of final end product, correct? A machine learning package. But a machine learning model alone is not an output. What you get after model training, you get what we call it as model artifacts. So model artifacts are basically the combinations of your machine learning model and a lot of other metadata that we used at the time of training, right? So we get this model artifacts and we store this model artifacts in a model registry. So we discussed the importance of model registry as well. They are dedicated tools to version your models, the metadata of your models, etc. Right? So then comes the final step. We are talking about model deployment step. So this is where we grab, let's say you have first version of a model, second version of model. third version of model. So we pick the latest version of a model, which is a best performing model. So then we go ahead and deploy this model to the production. So then we go ahead and integrate it, and then we started operating in a production. So this is where you have your end users would be started consuming the model. So then comes what? We do have an end-to-end traceability as well. What do you mean by traceability? Just monitoring everything that you have built so far, starting from, let's say, data pre-processing step to model deployment and operation step. So where we have your machine learning model in a production. So where you keep on monitor the machine learning model in a production, right? So then comes, we do also have what we call it as feedback loop. So what happens here? You have a customer who brings more data, correct? And what we need to do, so we need to go ahead and collect all the new data, and we need to use this new data again for the future where we want to retrain this model, right? So this is where we do also have what we call it as automated quality gates. So what is this automated quality gates? This automated quality gates plays very important role, right? So where it actually helps you to decide whether it's the best model, can we go ahead and deploy this model to the production or not? So let's say then comes, you can also have a quality gate. So which also helps you in deciding, let's say, whether your data has been prepared well or not in the data pre-processing step, right? So a quality gate is basically a condition. Let's say I'm training a regression model. I use a matrix called MSC. So I would be having a simple condition. If my MSC score is less than or equal to 6, if this condition is true, right, I will be going ahead and deploying this model to the production. Otherwise, if this is false, I won't deploy this model to the production. So basically, a quality gate is where your organization sets a benchmark, right? Saying that which model that we need to deploy to the production, which is not, right? So this is exactly what we call it as a level 4 architecture project. And then comes, you do have automated retraining jobs. See, consider that now I have deployed my first version of a model to the production, as well as now through the feedback loop, I'm collecting all the new data. So here your organization would be scheduling your pipelines, this entire pipelines, saying that once in every 6 months or once in every 1 year or once in every month, I want to train this second version of a model. So let's imagine now we have deployed first version. So automatically what happens, let's say every first day of a month, for an example, let's say I will say every first day of a month, what happens, it will automatically grab all the new data that we have collected. Let's imagine for the last 1 month, your model is already in a production. It will grab last 1 month data from your customers, and it will again run this entire pipeline, and it will produce the second version of model. And again, we go ahead and replace the version 1 with version 2 of a model. So which we call it as a level 4 architecture project. So in this particular program, we will be building all the different levels of project. So it can be level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4 projects. Yes. So saying that, now let's get into the very important discussion here. So different kind of roles which is involved in MLOps. So what happens here? See, developing a successful machine learning project definitely involves varieties of experiences, required extreme collaboration among the team, right? So you need to, let's say many different, let's say the skills here, people from different domain to get started. So let's say we are talking about, yes, there are data analysts who can be part of MLOps, data engineers, data scientists, research or applied scientists, ML engineers, or what we call it as, let's say otherwise DevOps engineers. So we don't call it as DevOps engineers. So we can call it as ML engineers or MLOps engineers, right? So developers, then comes MLOps engineers basically, right? See what happens. The first thing is, let's say the first thing we will be getting started with the first use case. Once you have a right use case, then we need a right set of peoples here, right? It's all about depending on the organizations. So, and again, so you cannot expect all these roles in every organization. It depends on their project needs. Okay. So the first thing, let's say what data analyst does. So data analyst, they work closely with the product manager and business team. So basically they drive the insights from the user data. They use tools like SQL, Excel sheets, and range of data visualization tools like Tableau and Power BI. So then comes our data engineers. So data engineers, they will make sure the infrastructure to collect, transform, process, and store the data for your data science jobs. So, and again, your data engineers will play a very important role in working with what I'm calling it as feature stores, data versioning tools. And they also use other tools like Spark, Hadoop, ETL tools, etc. And then comes our dear data scientist. Yes. So those are the people, someone who builds the machine learning models, which will be part of final end product. Then comes research or applied scientist. For an example, when we're talking about research or applied scientist, so obviously you cannot expect this role in every organizations, but organizations who are working on a cutting edge technology, Google, Microsoft, yeah, OpenAI, just imagine that. So those organizations, they might have what we call it as research or applied scientists. They're usually working on developing new algorithms which can solve various different problems in your organization, right? Yeah. So then comes we are talking about yes, ML engineers or DevOps engineers. So basically, when we're talking about ML engineers, are in if an ML, DevOps engineer transform into MLOps, he can be MLOps engineer or ML engineer. So let's say when we're talking about machine learning engineer, their work will be overlapped with data engineers, and but they focus largely on machine learning models and related infrastructures. So what your ML engineer does, he will be closely working with data scientist as well, because data scientist is someone who creates a machine learning model, and your ML engineer will be taking the machine learning model and he will be deploying that to the production. So that is ML engineer. So then comes, you will be also having a developers in your organization, and you know that we can say they are the last piece of a puzzle. They built a front end UI, the customer facing application. So then comes our MLOps engineers. So MLOps engineers, they work closely with all those different peoples, and MLOps engineers who actually provides the directions. MLOps engineers are someone who builds the automation which stitches the work between data analysts, data engineers, data scientists, any other stakeholders that you do have in your organization. So you take care of this complete automation, right? So saying that, let's have a quick look, a quick taste of a recipe here. I mean, let's have a taste of different tools of MLOps, different tools that we use in MLOps here, right? Obviously, so here in our program, we call it as it's a 360-degree view of MLOps. So what do you mean by 360-degree view of MLOps? We get to cover, let's say, anything that is needed in terms of MLOps. It can be AWS, Azure, GCP, including open source tools. Okay, so let's get started. So let's have a flavors of different tools that are available across, right, the world in terms of MLOps. I mean, there are a lot of tools. This particular slide will just get an idea, and we will also talk about the tools that we use in our program as well, right? Okay, so now let's say we are talking about different tools for MLOps, like data versioning, experiment tracking, code versioning, model registries, and model monitoring tools that we need to have, right? So we know what it takes to build a machine learning model. We do understand the initial steps, right? First is bringing a data collection and labeling. So we bring the data first. Then what we do, data exploration, which is nothing but data cleaning. We clean the data, right? So then we go ahead and start training this machine, right? So basically we started teaching the data to a machine. So what we call it as model training and model evaluation. So you know what is model evaluation is? This is where we evaluate a metrics, right? It's some kind of a score which helps us to decide whether it is a model has been trained in a proper way or not. Then comes, we go ahead and deploy this model to the production, isn't it? Yeah, these are the steps. Obviously, in order to work with these particular steps, we use different types of tools within your organization. So we call it as MLOps stack maturity. Any organization might use different tools here. Let's say here we are talking about different kind of IDEs, right? A code editing tools, right? So it can be, let's say we are talking about Jupyter notebooks. We are talking about, let's say VS Code. It can be Spider. There are different kind of IDEs you can use. Then comes, we talked about importance of code versioning, right? So here we have a good example is GitHub, you know it, Bitbucket. Our AWS has something called their own repository. Azure has Azure repositories. So we can use any code repositories, right? So then comes, we are talking about data labeling tools. So let's say when you're trying to teach a difference between a cat and a dog to your machine, you might be having a picture of a cat, and you should also have a text file which says it's a cat, right? So because your machine doesn't understand a picture, it understands in the form of number. So then comes, we are talking about data exploration and visualization tools, right? As a human beings, you know that we are a visual beings, right? So that means when we see something visually, we do understand, right? So this is where we use different kind of data visualization tools. It can be Matplotlib, Seaborn, etc. for an example. So basically what happens, this data visualization tools will actually help us to get a better idea about your data. So then comes, we are talking about feature engineering. So this is where your data scientists or data engineers comes into picture. They use different kind of tools in order to perform data engineering. It can be sklearn, feature tools, Feast. So there are different tools that is available. So then comes, we are talking about model training tools. So we discussed about algorithms. Algorithms plays very important role in order to train the machine learning models. A data scientist might pick any different kind of an algorithm for different use cases here. TensorFlow, sklearn, XGBoost, Keras, there are a lot, right? Then comes building a quick POC. Let's say before we go ahead and deploy this model to the production, a data scientist want to decide, okay, so you want to see how this model works. You want to build some quick POC. He might use Jupyter as Streamlit to temporarily test it. So then comes, we are talking about model debugging and visualization tools, right? So let's say you have a machine learning models. So you need to have some kind of a tool to go ahead and debug it to see how the model has been trained, for an example. So this is where we use tools like Neptune.ai, and there are commercial tools as well. So this particular slide also have a commercial tools as well. So that means where you can pay a subscription, you can also start using it. So weights and biases, TensorBoard, for an example. Then comes, we are talking about model tuning and hyperparameter tuning jobs. So we discussed about your data scientist does something called experiments. So in order to does this experiment, there are different SDKs, different algorithms are available. So these are the, let's say Keras tuner, for an example. And each and every algorithm has its own SDK that you can able to use it to hyperparameter tuning. So then comes, we are talking about experiment tracking. So we discussed a data scientist does different experiments, experiment 1, experiment 2, experiment 3. So this is where we will be working on different tools. As an MLOps engineer, you'd be helping them to setting up the different tools where you can so go ahead and start working on this particular tools to set up an experiment tracking tools for, let's say, MLOps engineers like MLflow, weights and biases, TensorBoard. So then comes model packing. So let's say if I want to deploy this model to the production, what we need to do? We need to pack it, isn't it? Right? If you want to go ahead and go for a lunch, let's say you want to eat a lunch in your office, you're getting a lunch from your home, you need to pack it, right? You need to pack the lunch. In the same way, we pack your machine learning model, then we go ahead and deploy to the production. There are different methods to go ahead and pack your model in the form of TensorFlow, our MLflow way of packing it, our ONNX, our Kubeflow, right? So then comes, we are talking about model serving. So where do you serve your model? That means where do you go ahead and deploy this model to the production basically, right? So you want to deploy this model anywhere. It completely depends on your organization. So you want to deploy the model on top of AWS or Azure or GCP, on premises, Docker, Kubernetes, serverless. So there are different methods. So here I just mentioned few, SageMaker or maybe Bento ML, etc. for an example. And then comes a very important tool set here. We are talking about workflow orchestration. So what do you mean by workflow orchestration? So let's say you need some method to stitch different things together, right? So let's say I want to go ahead and stitch a data pre-processing with model training, with model evaluation and model deployment, right? So this is where we bring workflow orchestration tools. Like we are talking about Apache Airflow, Kubeflow, ZenML. There are different tools. There are commercial tools as well, like 𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸, for an example. And then we discussed about data versioning tools. We do understand the importance of it, right? So we discussed about DVC. This is what exactly DVC logo looks like. There are a lot of other tools. Neptune.ai is there. Git large files are there. There are commercial tools as well. So like 𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸, weights and biases that you can use. And we discussed about model registries, isn't it? We discussed about the importance of versioning your model, for an example, right? So let's say we're talking about MLflow. And again, there are other tools as well. So weights and biases, 𝐻𝐸𝐻𝐸. Like every cloud platform has their own model registry. SageMaker in AWS, Azure Machine Learning Studio in Azure, or Vertex AI in GCP. So then comes model monitoring tools, right? So there is the famous open source tool, which we call it as Evidently AI, right? Which we're going to use it in our program. Every cloud has their own SDK that we can use to get started with model monitoring job. And you can use other tools like Seldon Core, Fiddler. So then comes the final set of tools like feature stores, right? A schema repositories that we discussed. Feast is pretty much famous open source tool that we will also explore. SageMaker or Azure ML or GCP Vertex AI, they have their own feature stores as well to get started. So this is just an idea. So you can see, so there are wide varieties of tools what your organizations can able to use to get started. So now let us talk about the folks who want to head their career into the MLOps. Let's say we are talking about the program which is going to help you for not just for the short time goal I'm talking about. So where next 10 to let's say 15 years a journey or into MLOps here. So we are talking about, so as you're going to work in a lead positions in MLOps, for an example, right? So how do you architect or how do you pick a tool for your organization? The key features of MLOps tools. Obviously, the first step is picking a open source tools or closed source tools. So we do understand open source tools are always free to use. There's no doubt about it, correct? But the problem is let's say if you have very few developers to work on these open source tools, and in case if you're picking the wrong open source tool where you don't have huge community, a good documentation, that hurts, right? So then comes we are talking about platform versus a specific tool. So this is where we are talking about commercial tools. So we are talking about cloud, open source, as well as commercial tools. So commercial tools are basically, let's say it's not a cloud, but they are tools which they ready-madely available everything for any organizations to get started with MLOps, but you'd be paying on subscriptions for them. So whether you're going to go with platform or specific tools, then comes we are talking about model and production environment monitoring. So consider you're going to pick a tool. It can be on AWS or Azure or GCP or open source tools. So does that tool supports model and environment monitoring? Environment monitoring, I mean the complete infrastructure that you have built. So, and in order to ensure that you could able to capture your bugs and they're documented and addressed in meantime. So then comes we are talking about, so your MLOps team, sometimes they might want to catch things like security and compliances concerns as well, right? So whether your tool provides that. So then comes we are talking about model templating and cataloging. So when we are talking about MLOps, templating plays very important role, right? See, consider that we are talking about this level 4 architecture project, right? So there are in every cloud, we will be building a level 4 architecture project. So it actually takes more than 10 to 15 hours to build this level 4 architecture projects. But yeah, when you're working in an organization, you'll be working with a lot of peoples, for an example. So what happens, let's say it takes a couple of months, let's say an average of 9 months for your organization to deliver any kind of an MLOps project. But you're not going to only work with that project alone. Tomorrow you would be working with different clients, different organizations. I mean, different clients within your organization, for an example. But the question is, do you want to reinvent a wheel again and again? No, right? So obviously, this is where the importance of templating comes in picture. So you already delivered the project for a specific client and you have a same template. You're going to make some changes, minimal changes. That's what exactly we call it as template, right? We make minimal changes, then we go ahead and deploy the different model, different problem we can solve for a different client. So then we are talking about automation in the process of model training, tuning, and drift management. So does the tool that you're going to pick, does it helps you in automating automated model training, tuning, right? Tomorrow I want to produce different versions of models. Then I want to go ahead and manage the drift, for an example, right? So does the tool provides that automation for you, right? Then comes pipeline management. So let's say when we're talking about pipeline management, let's say when we're building any kind of an ML automation here, right? There are different stakeholders who comes into the picture, right? So let's say we are talking about data engineers, data scientists, ML engineers, right? We are talking about other people's are, let's say we're talking about the overall MLOps engineers, for an example. So each and every person will be responsible for different activity here, right? So what happens, do you have does the pipeline supports, let's say, automated triggers up, let's say automated notifications for your team? So maybe you have a CI/CD pipeline that got broke, right? So can it notify, right, the specific team, alert them, right? Or maybe collecting the logs, etc. So then we are talking about collaboration and communication capabilities, right? So when we are talking about, let's say MLOps is all about collaboration and communication. So making sure that, let's say your workflow that you're building is documented, your questions are answered, your team could able to collaborate easily. So this is where we are talking about using project management tools. We are talking about using communication tools like Slack, etc. Right? So yeah, some of the key factors as you would be focusing on applying for lead positions in MLOps, what you should have the capabilities. Now let us talk about, yeah, MLOps on a cloud. So what cloud offers in terms of MLOps? And first of all, why do we need to learn the cloud? Yeah. So we all know that cloud is something that you cannot ever avoid. Every organization, they use cloud platform, right? And again, here we are talking about, yes, we definitely cannot avoid the cloud, but the question is, what exactly are we going to learn? So which cloud platforms that we will be focusing on? So yes, we will be focusing on not one, not two, it's three. Yes, we will be focusing on the three leading cloud platforms that is outside in the market. You know, AWS leads the market. They occupy majority of a share. Then comes Azure, then comes GCP. Yes, we do cover MLOps on all the three cloud platforms. That is AWS, Azure, GCP, right? So not just limited to the cloud platform, open source tools as well. See, today what happens, any organization who use cloud, they don't use cloud, but they still use open source tools. There are organizations who use multi-cloud as well. You will see definitely when you check any JD, any job description of, let's say what we're talking about, MLOps engineer, definitely you will see they do mention at least not one, not two. They do mention all the three cloud platforms, AWS, Azure, and GCP. So not limited to that, open source tools as well. Let's say we are talking about Dockers, Kubernetes, MLflow, Kubeflow, ZenML, DVC, right? Does it sounds like a rhyming? Yes. So there are a lot of tools. Okay, saying that, let's focus on the kind of a tools that we will be learning throughout this particular program. So obviously we'll be getting started with Git-based tools. So this is where we'll be getting started with Git and working with different kind of code repositories like GitHub, working with Azure repos and any other particular code repositories that we're talking about. So then comes, we are talking about learning CI/CD. So what is anyway the CI/CD is all about? So which we're talking about continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what do you mean by that anyway? So CI/CD is a tools that we use in any software industry to deliver the newer version of a software to the production. So basically, CI/CD tools helps us to build your software, pack your software, test your software, and deliver this software to the production. So which we're talking about DevOps. Yes, we use the same kind of CI/CD tools in a different way when we're getting started with MLOps, right? So consider that. Let's talk about, there is a Java developer. So I'm talking about a DevOps workflow here. So Java developer writes some code, he commits the code. I mean, he pushed the code to a code repository. So there are something called automated triggers. They do understand by automatically saying that, okay, you have your software developer made some changes and he pushed the changes to the code. And this is where we have our build tools, which takes this software who build a Java application. See what happens when a Java developer creates a Java application. Once we build the final, and let's say the job for us to go ahead and create a executable jar file, right? So here is a build tool which actually builds the software. And once the building process is completed, right, this is where we go ahead and started doing testing. So once the software is built, we need to test it, right? We want to ensure that it is good and fair enough to be deployed to the production. So here we go ahead and run the test, and we also ensure that your testing is passed or not. Then finally, if your testing is passed, then we go ahead and finally focus on deploying this particular software to the production, right? So here is a simple workflow. We'll get a better idea. So here is our setup, a CI/CD setup. So let's talk about, let's say you're running an e-commerce business. Let's say you're into e-commerce business, and in your e-commerce business, otherwise just think of an Amazon itself. When you go to Amazon, there is in the production view, there is a green color button, which you actually click to pay now to buy any products on Amazon. You know that. So green is not so much attractive. There are a lot of customers who send a feedback. So green is not so much attractive. Change it to red. Okay. So for an example, a simple feature that you want to develop. So let's say here comes your developer who makes the changes to the button. Just imagine in the perspective of if you want to develop any software, any new feature that you want to develop. So here comes your developer, changes the button color from green to red. And here is the complete CI/CD setup. Let's say we're using AWS for an example. So I'm using GitHub as your code repository. This is where I have my code, right? And I have multiple branches. So I have dev branch for development and I have production. So what I do initially, I will push the code to my dev. So what happens, this is where I have initial steps. I will take the software, I started building it. Once the software has been built, I will be having an artifacts, which is ready to be deployed to the production. Then I will take these artifacts, then I go ahead and deploy that to my web server. So here we are talking about simple web apps. So initially deploy my application to my dev environment, not to production. So here comes your internal team. They go ahead and check the quality of a button, the functionality of a button. Can we able to click it? The functionality of a button is working or not? If you're satisfied with that, then in a next step, we go ahead and deploy the same button, the red color button, to the production. So once, if all the testing is done, you deploy to the production, then comes your actual front end. I mean, the actual users, they would be started using your application, right? In the same way, if I want to integrate my CI/CD pipelines to my MLOps pipelines, it would look like this. So here comes your data scientist, or MLOps engineers, for an example. So what MLOps engineers might do? So they might be working on infrastructure as a code. They might be making some changes to the infrastructure. Maybe your data scientist is writing some Python code for building a machine learning model. They make some changes to the code. They push the code to a code repository. It can be any kind of a code repository. And once they push the code to a code repository, everything is automated now. So now what happens? Automatically the code has been pushed. The first step in a workflow is basically what we call it as feature engineering, or what we're calling it as data preparation. So this is where we get started with automated data preparation. So once automatically data is prepared, then we go to the second step, which we call it as model training. We automatically take the data, which is already prepared in a previous step. And this is where we started training a machine learning model. So now you have a machine learning model as a final output. Then in a third step, I want to decide whether it is a good model to be deployed to the production. How do I know? I need to generate some score. So this is where I go ahead and do model evaluation. I generate some score. This particular score would be helpful for me to decide. So how do I decide? So this is where we talk about quality gate. So we discussed about quality gate already. So this is where I have a simple condition. So let's say the score is called MSC. It's a kind of a matrix. Just imagine it's a number. So here I write a simple condition. If my MSC score is less than or equal to 6, 6 is a benchmark that is your organization has decided. If this is true, right, then I will go ahead and register my first version of a model to my model registry. So this is where in the fifth step, I register my model. Then what happens? I will take this first version of a model. Let's say I will use this CI/CD pipelines. I will go ahead and build it. Maybe let's say I am Dockerizing my model. So let's say I want to pack my model within a Docker. So then in the next step, let's say I will go ahead and deploy my model to my model hosting platform. So maybe what we call it as real-time endpoint to the batch or serverless, Docker, Kubernetes, right? I go ahead and deploy it. So here as well, I will go ahead and deploy my first version of a model to dev environment. So which is only accessible to your internal team. You go ahead and test your model, see if your model is working fine, see the quality is good. If you're satisfied with that, then in the next step, you go ahead and deploy the same version of a model to the production. And then comes where you have model monitoring and the complete infrastructure monitoring. So where you keep on monitoring your model. And then comes, we discussed about automated scheduling. So maybe once in every 3 months, once in every 6 months, you go ahead and retrain the model. And again, you produce the second version of model, third version of model, fourth version of model, fifth version of model, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc. You go ahead and retrain it. That's what exactly we're talking about, automated training pipeline. So, okay, we are discussing about something called MLOps. Okay, so here comes something called LLMOps. Okay, what is this? Are we altogether starting some different story? Definitely not. Yes. So here we are talking about, let's say, what could be the difference in delivering your large language models to the production? Let's say, we are talking about to deploy any kind of a Gen AI models to the production. There's no difference, but there are few more additional components that we'll be learning. See, we discussed it can be LLMs or any kind of a Gen AI models. They are kind of a deep learning models. They are machine learning models. But in the world of today, Gen AI, you know that definitely this generative AI models can be misused in many different ways, isn't it? Yes. We can able to use these generative AI models to generate some offensive text, offensive pictures, offensive videos, offensive audios. But the question is, how do you safeguard? How any organization is going to implement a responsible AI and a responsible way of building any generative AI applications? Deploying your models. So we'll be having the same workflow. So what is the first step? The first step is data preparation and versioning. We do understand the importance of data versioning. So in the second step, so here we are talking about supervised fine tuning, right? Whether you're training a model from a scratch or when we're talking about most of the generative AI use cases, they do fine tuning. So which is nothing but they take an existing model, which is available in industry, they update the knowledge for that particular model. And then comes what? Once you train or fine tune your model, you'll get your own version of your machine learning models, right? So this is where model registries comes into the picture. The same model registries that we discussed, it can be MLflow, something on AWS, something on Azure, something on GCP. So we use the same model registries where we can go ahead and version your models or model artifacts. Then comes what? I will go ahead and run the pipeline again. In a fourth step, I will grab the best performing model. Maybe version 3 is the latest. I will go ahead and take this version 3 of my model. Then I go ahead and deploy this version 3, maybe my own LLM, my own generative AI model to the production. So now I have my LLM in a production. So what happens next? So let's say this is where I will be having my users coming to the picture, right? So this is where, let's say we're talking about your users will be writing a prompts, right? We do something called prompting, right? So you go to ChatGPT, you write the prompt, right? You go to Gemini, you write the prompt. So ChatGPT or Gemini is a final end product, but we are talking about how you actually build a product. So this is where, let's say, we integrate responsible AI. So responsible AI will safeguard ensuring that your AI that you're building is used responsibly by your customers. So what happens, a responsible AI will act as a filter. Let's say if a user is inputting any prompt which is offensive, if user is trying to generate some offensive content, your responsible AI will block that request. Similarly, if AI is generating some offensive output, yes, your AI might also generate some offensive content which might hurt someone. So still responsible AI would play a very important role here to filter that response. Then you get the filtered output for your user. So this is what it takes, this only difference. So we'll be also talking about that. So then comes, now let us talk about the different CI/CD tools that we will be covering in our program. Yes, not limited to one cloud. So we will be getting started with different kind of CI/CD tools on top of AWS. We'll be talking about code pipelines, code build, code deploy, etc. And yes, we will be covering the complete Azure DevOps suite, Azure repos, Azure pipelines, Azure test plans, boards, etc. And not then comes when it comes to GCP, we'll be also exploring GCP based DevOps tools like Cloud Run, Cloud Build, Cloud Deploy, and its own code repositories. So then comes, we are talking about not limited to, let's say, the cloud based tools, and we'll be also talking about open source tools as well, free to use tools. Like let's say we're talking about Jenkins. Yes, we'll be also talking about, let's say, GitHub Actions as well to get started, right? So then comes, yes, yeah. So obviously, as we're talking about open source tools, getting started with understanding Dockers plays very important role. Dockers are everywhere in this today's world. So we'll be getting started with Dockers, Dockers for MLOps. What I mean, Kubernetes for MLOps, and we will be exploring a managed Kubernetes platforms on all the clouds. Let's say we're talking about Amazon EKS or Azure AKS or Google Kubernetes Engine, or what we call it as GKE, right? So then comes the next set of open source tools that we will be exploring in this particular program. So yes, for data versioning, we will be getting started with DVC from the scratch, understanding what is Git large files. For we discussed about importance of feature stores. So we'll be getting started with Feast, a very famous open source feature store. And we will be also going ahead and discussing about different workflow orchestration tools. Yes, we'll be getting started with Kubeflow, understanding Apache Airflow, and such other open source tools we will be also discussing about, like ZenML, Metaflow, MLRun, getting started with Argo workflow, so Kedro or CML. Then comes the one tool that you definitely need to have when you're stepping into AI industry, understanding model registries. Yes, we will be getting started from the scratch, understanding what is ML flow is about. And as we discussed already, as an MLOps engineer, you would be also taking care of infrastructure. It depends on an organization. They do expect you to do infrastructure as well. So we'll be also talking about various different infrastructure as a tool, right? So we'll be talking about getting started with Terraform. And when we're talking about AWS, they have something called CDK. Yes, we'll be learning about cloud deployment kit on top of AWS. We use Azure ARM templates by using Azure DevOps, right? And then we are talking about, for model monitoring tools, we'll be exploring the very famous and must know model monitoring tool that is Evidently AI. And yes, that's an open source model monitoring tool. And then comes the cloud-based tools that we will be exploring. Yes, when it comes to AWS, we'll be getting started with Amazon SageMaker Studio. When it comes to Azure, yes, we'll be getting started with Azure Machine Learning Workspace. When it comes to GCP Vertex AI. So this is where we use these tools to build all the level 4 architecture projects. So then comes, when we're talking about these cloud platforms, they have their own SDKs, software development kits for getting started with model monitoring. So we'll be exploring and getting started with one of an hands-on on any one of a cloud. Let's say it can be an AWS, Azure, or GCP. So where we'll be getting started with the SDKs for model monitoring. So not limited to that, we will be also exploring about commercial tools. Yes, cloud-based tools and open source tools are really important, but yes, we call it as 360-degree view of ML ops. Yes, we will also explore the commercial tools as well. Like what is 𝐻𝐩𝐿, what is 𝐻𝐿, what is weights and biases, right? How do we get started? So then comes the final part is post-deployment challenges. Peace. Okay, now you have deployed the model. Now, yeah, there's no peace. But yeah, the actual job starts after you deploying the model. So we'll be having some challenges related to software engineering, post-deployment of your models. We'll be having the challenges related to ML engineering. And we will be having a couple of challenges when you're deploying your models on edge. We'll be talking about that. So we'll be talking about model monitoring, we'll be talking about how to optimize your models, how to scale your models, right? So saying that, so the part of second highlights, how to master your MLOps. Why don't we wait? Can we get started with a quick demo here? So remember, we are just in the second highlights. You made a promise to stay till the third highlights, okay, to get an 100% of value. All you need to put your investment in your time here in this particular demo session. So let's get started. I will just quickly show you the end-to-end, the level 4 architecture project that I built on top of AWS. You can explore in detail about this particular project in our course. So let me just go to my Amazon SageMaker console. So here we go. Okay, perfect. You can see this is my Amazon SageMaker Studio, one of a tool that we discussed. So Amazon SageMaker Studio is a platform which is built for data scientists, MLOps engineers, or any stakeholders who want to get started with building a complete end-to-end machine learning project. So here I will be going to, let's say, left side navigation panel. There are deployments, there are projects here. So this is where I have created one project. I call it as Test MLOps Pro. So my project is successfully completed. I will go inside this project and I will go inside my pipeline. So what do you mean by pipeline? This is the complete level for automation that I have built. So let me just go inside this pipeline. And now I'm inside executions. So what do you mean by executions? So consider that this particular pipeline has been built in a way that, so let's say each and every time when this pipeline executes, I will get the newer version of a model. So far, I have only one execution you can able to notice, and this execution is so far it is succeeded. So let's say if I have one execution, I have first version of a model. If I have another execution, I have second version of a model. If I have another version, I might have third version of a model. But when do I get second version and third version? It depends on an organization. As I mentioned, maybe you want to retrain the entire model with a newer version of a data. As I mentioned, that is depending on the schedule. So maybe you can schedule your job to run every 1 month. That means automatically you take the new arrived data for last 1 month and you'll be started preparing and training and evaluating and producing the second version of model. When you produce second version of model, you have second version of model. Right now I have only one version of a model. Perfect. So now let me get inside this particular execution. Okay. So here, this is what exactly the orchestration that I'm talking about, right? So let's say this is the complete orchestration that we have built. Yes. So here comes MLOps engineers would be taking care of the CI/CD, the infrastructure part. So we'll be having a CI/CD pipelines. Either we use Azure, let's say either we use AWS DevOps tools or open source tools like GitHub Actions for an example. So through that, this is the final output. So this is the orchestration that we have built. Okay, so this is an automated orchestration. So I don't manually interrupt here. Everything will be done automatically. So what do you think the first step in your workflow? The first step in a workflow is data preparation, right? So this is a step. So where I have done a data pre-processing. So anyway, if I want to give a quick example, what kind of a model that I have trained doesn't matter because I can use the same exact workflow to train any classical machine learning model to large language model to Gen AI model. So here actually I'm training a machine learning model, which is actually going to predict an age of an abalone. I mean, in case of you're a seafood lover, you might know what is an abalone. It's some kind of a sea snail. So what exact problem that we are solving? Basically, we are predicting an age of an abalone because in the market, a fish market, yeah, whatever the market it is, like abalones will be sold based on the age. So here, this machine learning model is going to predict an age of an abalone. So the first step in a workflow, we do data pre-processing. Then what we do? What we do in a data pre-processing step, we split the data to training and testing. So what we do here, I get my training data and here I go ahead and train my machine learning model. So what could be the output of model training? I will get my machine learning model. So from this, that will be part of final end product, but it is not final end product. So then comes, I have my machine learning model. I will take this machine learning model to model evaluation step. So what do we do in a model evaluation step? In a model evaluation step only, this is where we calculate a score that helps an organization to decide whether it's the best model. Can I go ahead and deploy this model to production or not? So this is where we go ahead and evaluate a score. So this is where we calculate what we call it as MSC or RMSC, F1 score. There are different metrics that we use for different algorithms. Okay. So here, let's imagine we calculated any one of a metrics. It can be MSC itself. Let's say if my MSC score is 4.5 for an example. Okay. So then comes, I have quality gate. So I will call this as a quality gate. We discussed what is a quality gate is. The duty of a quality gate, which is going to help us to decide whether it is a fit model, can we deploy that to production or not? I mean, can we put this model to the plates of a customer or not? So this is where we decide. The condition is pretty much simple. You have a benchmark that is decided by your organization. So if your MSc score is, once again, if your MSc score is less than or equal to 6, 6 is a benchmark that is set by your organization. If it is true, I will register my model to model registry. Yes, you can see the output is true. That means, yes, my MSc score is 4.5, whether it is less than or equal to 6. Yes, it is true. That's why you could able to see your model has been successfully registered to a model registry. And we discussed what is model registry already. It's a tool which helps us to version a model. Okay. Then, as I mentioned, now I have my model in a model registry. Can we get started with model registry? Yes. Towards left side navigation panel, you can see this is where I have models, which I call it as model registry. So here you can able to see I have different model registries, not one. Okay, you can see this is the model registry that I've created for this demo, which I call it as test MLOps Pro. If I expand it, you can see I have my first version of a model, which is not deployed to the production. What we discussed if we have a model, we don't directly deploy to the production. We'll be having some manual intervention. Let's say I'm a MLOps engineer, data scientist. I will go inside this model. I will click on this version 1. Okay, so here I will go ahead and check all the metrics. So how does your model has been trained? What's your metrics? So here are the different metrics that I calculated. I have calculated RMSE on training, RMSE on validation. So I will also go ahead and calculate my evaluation. So far we don't have any evaluation, not a problem. So if I satisfied, right, with this metrics, then I go to the final deployment step. So here's the final deployment step. Now here I will approve. As a senior folks, I will click on this drop down here. You can see it is pending approval. I have an option to reject it if the quality is not good. Now it seems to be good. I will click on approve. And this is where I can also pass some commands. Let's say all test. Okay, add some meaningful commands. Then I can click on save. That's it. That's all what you need to do. Here you're approving the model to be deployed to the production. So now officially we have changed the status of a model to be deployed. So now what happens? I have sent a signal to deploy this model. So it will take a couple of minutes. Now the model will get deployed to the production. So now what happens here? Towards left side navigation panel, you can see there is something called endpoints. So your model that is deployed to the production will get reflected in the endpoints. So far, there is no endpoint because it's going to take some time. What do you mean by model deployment? I'm taking this model, I'm deploying it on some kind of a server, right? So we'll take a look after a few minutes. We'll come back to the screen. Then we will see model is deployed or not. Okay. 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 Can we get started now? Yes, the third highlight, what we discussed about. Okay. So we'll discuss about the career opportunities in MLOps right now. Let's get started. So why do you need to really think about getting into AI? We know the answer because AI is something that is going to be integrated in every organization tomorrow. And we definitely want to be a creator of an AI. And again, see, consider that you guys are coming from various different backgrounds. You might be a data engineer, DevOps engineer, solution architect, etc. But the question is, so why you want to transform into AI? So obviously, one of a good quote is made by Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates is a founder of Microsoft, and now he is actually someone who is really good at making predictions, right? So, you know, Bill Gates predicted pandemic just happened. And again, he's a good predictor, right? So he made a quote in a late show, which is conducted by, from Stephen. So 3 to 4 months ago. So he said, AI is the first technology that has no limits. We need to seriously think about this word. What do you mean by that? AI is the first technology that has no limits. So the question is, that means any other technologies apart from AI has some limits, right? So let's say we are talking about any kind of a technology so far has its own saturation. Let's talk about DevOps. DevOps has been there in in the industry for a couple of decades already, right? So DevOps is not transforming anything new. So for DevOps is DevOps, we use this technology to deliver a software. But let's think about any other technology, etc. But if we compare that with AI is taking a different turns, not every month, not every year, every day it is taking different turns, right? Every day there is a new technology that's outside in the market, right? And let's say today we are talking, let's say last 10 years ago, we are talking about training a simple model, data science. And today we are talking about every organization is trying to deploy this model to the production, correct? So, I mean, let's say we are talking about today we talk more about AI than last 5 years ago. But just ask this question yourself: why ChatGPT came to the market in year 2020? Yes, they came to the market end of 2020, but why they are not in a market last? We are talking about 5 years ago or 10 years ago. The concept is same. If you remember that, if you go back to that first slide that we discussed, every organizations are innovating. They are building a model. They're trying to figure out what they can do, how they can able to make a money out of it, right? And obviously, post let's say 2022, let's say you should able to see starting from ChatGPT, and every organizations now they are bringing their models to the production. And if they want to bring their models to the production, if they want to put these models to the plates of their customer, they need someone called MLOps engineers who is going to help them to deliver this model to the production. I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about, let's say, where AI is going to take different turns. Today, we are talking about generative AI. Tomorrow, we might talk about, let's say, AGIs, right? Artificial general intelligence. We are not there yet for AGIs. Then we talk about ASIs. So then we might talk about Terminators, which is going to come and kill this world. Yeah, you know, Terminator movie. Yes, we are heading there. There's no doubt about it. I'm just kidding. Maybe in a right way. Yes, but AI is the one technology which is going to take different turns. So what is that for you? Obviously, the opportunity. There's a never-ending opportunity in AI, right? So which I call it as the job which pulls you forever. I mean, which gets you inside this forever. The most secure job, otherwise, putting in a very simple way. Okay. So the question is, so who can able to learn this MLOps? Who will be part of this MLOps basically? So it can be any software developers, anyone from IT background, they can get started with MLOps. See, when we're talking about MLOps, it's not a full-time development job. It's basically, I mean, it's more into the operation side of an AI. So you'll be helping any organization to deliver this AI to the production, right? So you can be a data scientist, you can be a data engineer, a data analyst, researcher, applied scientist, ML engineers, or you might be a DevOps engineer. You can be a perfect fit to get into MLOps. Or you might be answering MLOps professionals or enthusiasts, or you want to know how to deploy this model to the production. Or let's say we are talking about, you might be someone who have a knowledge on Dockers, Kubernetes, AWS, Azure, GCP. You might be a solution architect, software tester even, or any individual who is interested to get into the AI industry. MLOps for you. There's no restrictions. So there is no, let's say as you are an MLOps engineer, you're not a data scientist. You don't build models here. See, consider that. We'll talk about very simple example. Let's go to a DevOps industry. DevOps engineers are not software developers, right? So there are software developers who build a software, and DevOps engineers, they make sure they take the software, packet test it, and deliver it to the production. The same thing you do it in MLOps. But yes, when we're talking about DevOps engineers, they cannot say, I have no idea what my a software developer is doing. The same thing. As you're an MLOps engineer, you'll be closely working with data science. So that's what exactly you'll be learning throughout this particular program. So, and if we talk about an actual income potential in MLOps, so here I'm talking about an average number, someone who has just 2 to 3 years of experience. So you might be having 6, 10, 18, 20 years of experience. So we have been there in this industry almost for 10 years. I have seen people who have minimum of 2 to 3 years of experience to maximum of 18 to 20 years of experience of people they take our program. See, they all look into the various different positions in MLOps, starting as an MLOps engineer, or MLOps lead architect, solution architect, MLOps solution architect, or let's say we're talking about MLOps specialist kind of a roles. So this program perfectly works for them. And let's say, what is an average statistics today? Let's say an average salary for MLOps engineers across let's say India, I'm talking about 2 to 3 years of experience, is around 35.1 lakhs according to, let's say, sixfigure.com. You can figure out yourself by going to that. In Bangalore, it's somewhere around 47 lakhs. So globally, we are talking about around $165,000 per annum. And again, this salary bracket can vary according to your different experience ranges, right? So you can see the max number of people falls in 20 to 30, and where you have more experience, 30 to 40 or 40 to 50 lakhs or greater than that. So yes, let's say when we're talking about AI industry, there is no doubt about how the AI job vacancy trend is. And this is actually from itjobworks.uk. So provides a pin-to-pin accurate results. So this AI potentials are growing each and every day, right? So when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about everything. Let's say it can be MLOps or any other AI related jobs that I'm talking about, right? But the actual problem is what, let's talk about an actual problem, right? The time to learn and time to get into the market, right? So basically, I will talk about an history here. So let's say it took 10 years. let's say when I'm talking about, drones, right? It took 10 years for the drones to, let's say, transform a specific industry, right? Before drones, just imagine a news reporter, a movie makers who is going with a huge choppers with a huge cameras on top of it. Right now, you can see this industry which took 10 years to transform, but you don't, honestly, we don't have such kind of a time. Why? Because you know that AI is transforming pretty much faster than any other industry. And again, we don't have much time to upskill. So the people who learn faster, they get to definitely use a bigger piece of cake, right? So because there's a new technology always in the market when it comes to AI. AI will never going to stop, right? So saying that, so where are you exactly is my question. So do you want to learn faster? Because I have seen folks, especially because as I'm a trainer, I talk to a lot of peoples here. There are folks who has inquiring about our program, not 1 year, there are 2 to 3 years, they're never transformed. And there are folks who have learned and they have transformed because I have seen people's after completing our program, they hardly take 1 to 1.5 months to figure out the job. So, and again, last month we had a one participant. His name is 𝐻𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐬𝐽. He's from DevOps background. So he got placed, but he got 6 offers. Six, not one. I literally said, 𝐻𝐻𝐾𝐚, I could have just taken the 6 offers. I could have given one for each and every participant. But forget about 6 offers, and he got 121% hike. Forget about that also. 121 is high, but he claimed he got 10 he is getting 10 interview calls per day. That's an awesome number. I'm just talking about last 2 to 3 months ago, right? So 10 to, 10 interview calls a day. I will share his testimonial. Take a look. Okay, now the most awaiting part. So now let's go ahead and discuss about our MLOps specialization program. So we are starting our brand new batch starting from the May 2nd. So this is not our, first batch. This could be our 21st batch that we are trying to do. So the new batch is scheduled for May 2nd. And obviously this is where you will be learning MLOps into a 360-degree. It's a 3 months program. Otherwise we are talking about it's a 12 weekends program. As I mentioned, this program will be happening on every weekends, every Saturday and Sunday, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. IST in case if you're joining from India, 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. from EST time zone, at 2:30 to 6:30 p.m. for CET time zone. So here is your opportunity. So now let's go ahead and discuss about the program workflow, how it works. Yes, every weekend we will be having a live sessions, and every Monday you'll be receiving an access to the recordings. And we do have optional to attend debugging sessions. It can be on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday. So it's a doubt clearing sessions where you join, where you share your screen, where I assist you, right? So as simple as that. So now let's go ahead and discuss about why the MLOps specialization program, ours, are so much unique than any other programs outside in the market. So because we say it's a 360-degree view of MLOps, what does that mean? We cover MLOps on multi-clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP. The entire world runs on top of it. Not just that, including open source tools. What does that really offers for you? Because you can literally apply for any kind of MLOps jobs outside in the market, because we get to cover everything that organization needs. It's an hundreds hours of program, more than 50 plus live hands-on labs, and there are 28 projects that we're going to work throughout our program. So how we are really making a difference here? See, around 20 projects, we will be building it during the live session itself. Whatever I do on my screen, parallelly you'll be doing it on your screen. That's how it's going to work with 101 debugging sessions. And what is so much unique about our program? One is the curriculum, as we are talking about. Another thing is, as I'm a trainer, I will be a trainer for this particular program, and I will be with you in every step of this particular program and every step of your, let's say, journey into getting into the AI industry. So as I'm a trainer, I will be in touch with you. You will be having a direct contact with me. You can reach out to me. You can ask me a million questions, bug me, extract all the value that you need from me. That's how it's going to work. So saying that, now let's go ahead and discuss about the pricing structure for this particular program. Obviously, in order to keep it affordable, we have not just one, 3 different pricing structures. Why 3? Let's discuss that. So obviously we do have advanced plus plan, advanced plan, and basic plan. Wait a minute. Why do we have these 3 different pricing structures? How does it really benefits? So now let's go ahead and discuss what is this basic plan, advanced plan, or advanced plus plan? What does it really fits for you? See, most of the working professionals, they either take advanced plan or advanced plus plan, or you can also get started with a basic plan. So let's discuss that. See, consider that whether you take basic plan or advanced plus plan, there is no exception in what you learn. Everyone learns a same exact curriculum. There's no difference in that. But what you're going to get as an additional features are going to be extra. So let's say if you take basic or advanced plus, everyone can able to attend live sessions. They will be having an access to the recordings, debugging sessions with access to all the free resources will be common in all the different plans. So then what is difference in advanced and advanced plus plan? Obviously, this is where when you go for advanced plan or advanced plus plan, the key difference is you get an access to a 6 months of support and bonus reattendance opportunity. Here you'll get 1 year support with bonus reattendance opportunity with instant access to recordings. Let's discuss that one by one. So what is this 6 months of support with resume preparation? How does it work? So this is where we offer a premium support for the folks who is looking for advanced plan or advanced plus plan. What is that? So this is where we put in our more expertise again. So obviously this support, a premium support can be split into 4 types. Step number 1, resume preparation. Right. So obviously you are upskilled in our program. Then how you go ahead and demonstrate your expertise in front of an interview. So this is where, as part of a resume preparation, we help you in biasing your resume accordingly. If any HR checks out, it should say you are an MLOps engineer. Maybe you are someone who's applying for MLOps beginner level jobs, are lead positions, or maybe you are someone who is applying for, let's say, what we are talking about, maybe the manager kind of positions in MLOps. We help you in optimizing your resumes. Step number 2, optimizing your job portals. Consider that you're applying for a jobs, LinkedIn, Naukri, Shine, whatever it is. We help you putting a right keywords so you can able to get better interview calls. That's a step number 2. Step number 3, a JD decoding sessions where we play very important role. What do you mean by JD decoding sessions? As I mentioned, maybe you are applying for a beginner level jobs in MLOps, lead level positions, let's say manager level positions. How does an interview will look like? So before you sit for a technical round of interview, you bring the JD to us and we sit for the discussion. We try to decode that, understanding the key tools they're looking forward, key technologies they're looking forward, and what is the story that you're going to deliver during the interview, right? So definitely they will be asking a question. Tell me, what have you done in terms of MLOps in a previous organization? You need to have a story that convinces an interviewer saying that you have really built something on MLOps. We help you in narrating that particular story as well. Then comes step number 4, a technical on-job support. Consider that now you got a job, you're working, you're stuck somewhere, you need some assistant, you need a sample code, some consultation, architecture review, some brainstorming. We are here to help you. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, the premium support that comes with advanced plan for 6 months, 1 year for advanced plus plan. And another opportunity is bonus reattendance opportunity. What is this bonus reattendance opportunity? This is where we add a more value. Consider that everyone is working professionals. We need to still, you cannot escape from AI. You need to upskill in some way you want to get into the AI industry. So what we do here, by registering for advanced plan or advanced plus plan, you get twice the chance to take a batch. Consider that you can still attend the May batch. Even after you completing the May batch, you will be allowed to take the right next batch again for free of cost. Let's say our next batch might happen in September, for an example. You'll be automatically added to September batch. That's how it's going to work. And then comes, if you go to advanced plus plan, one more key difference is an instant access to the recordings, right? So obviously still we do have around 30 days for our program to kick in, right? But you don't need to wait till May 2nd, or you don't need to wait for next 3 months to complete a program. Folks who register for advanced plus plan, they get an access to the instant access to the recordings of our previous batch in next 24 hours. Let's say if you complete the registration right now. So that means you can get started with any topic, any module whenever you want with an assistant with me anytime that you want. So that's how it's going to work. Advanced plus users, they get an access to the recordings immediately. So this is the pricing for let's say an INR. Let's say our basic plan starts with 45,999, advanced is around 48,999, and advanced plus plan is just 54,999. And if you want to see the pricing in USD, our advanced plus plan would be costing around $779, and our advanced plan will be costing around $679, and the basic plan would be costing around just $622. And we do have EMI options on all the plans. You can get started with that. So with that, obviously the next thing that we're going to discuss is obviously the surprises. No, I'm not going to discuss surprises, always to be waited, right? So let it wait. So we'll discuss that later. But yeah, before we discuss about the surprise, so I'm just going to go back to my AWS account. I'm going to show you whether I have a model here deployed or not. Then we will go back to discussing about the curriculum, because before I go back, I showed you whether my model is deployed or not. So let me just go ahead and hit on this refresh button. Yep, here we go. Successfully, you can see now my model is deployed to the production. It's running in production. If I go inside this endpoint, this is where my model is deployed. And you can see there is something called URL here. This is what we call it as a Rust API that we have created, which will be used by your front-end developers to build beautiful applications. And we all also have an option to test this model here itself. As an MLOps engineer, we'll be testing it. I'm not going to test it right now. I'm going to test it after discussing about the curriculum. Okay. Okay. Before I reveal the surprises, now let's go ahead and discuss about the awesome curriculum that we do have, the best curriculum that's outside in the market for MLOps. Let's go ahead and have a discussion on that. Then I will reveal the surprises. See, I will be sharing this particular PDF for you as well. End of the session, you can go ahead and download everything. You can get everything, A to Z, everything that you need to know in terms of this particular program. You can learn about us, who can apply, the complete detailed curriculum, the program fee, and testimonials that I would highly recommend for you to check it out. So yeah, so now let's go ahead and quickly discuss about the curriculum, the awesome curriculum that we do have in this particular program. So let's get started. We do have totally 15 modules, 1-5. Okay. Okay, so let's get started with our module number 1. So module number 1 is all about getting introduced in the world of MLOps. Okay, so now let's get started. So now let's go ahead and discuss what we have in this introduction to MLOps. So this is where we'll be diving deep into understanding the entire world of MLOps, understanding different tools. So this is where we'll be understanding and discussing about, so again, how it is different from, let's say we are talking about DevOps, not just DevOps, there is something called AI Ops, Model Ops, LLM Ops, FM Ops, GitOps. We'll be discussing that. The very important discussion in our module number 1 is we'll be discussing about the CI/CD production case study. We will be taking a 5 different organizations case study. We'll discuss how they have implemented automation, right? So saying that, then comes a module number 2. In a module number 2, this is where we are talking about overview of ML and MLOps stages, right? So this is where we'll be talking about, yes, we talked about importance of versioning. So this is where we'll be discussing about versioning your data, the code, models, features, containers, and different kind of testings we do in MLOps, the strategies in implementing CI/CD, reproducibility, deployment, monitoring. And very importantly, this is where we'll be discussing about architectures, open source architecture, getting started with Kubeflow, Apache Airflow, MLflow, Metaflow, Kedro, ZenML, MLrun, CML. There are a lot of open source tools. And then comes the cloud native tools. This is where we'll be discussing about how you can able to build a level 4 architecture or level 3 or level 2 on AWS. How does the architecture looks like? AWS, GCP, and Azure, right? And let's say I'm talking about the demo here. This demo, what kind of an architecture that is actually running behind it. This is the architecture. Okay, don't get freak out. This is the architecture. So this architecture, it took around hardly 10 to 15 hours for us to build during the program. So this is the sort of an architecture that we'll be deploying, but I'm not going to discuss about this architecture right now. So yeah, we are far away before we need to understand a lot of concepts. So then comes module number 3 is all about Git. So this is where we'll be diving deep into understanding MLOps practices for Git, understanding commands, branching, and collaborations, etc. And module number 4 is where we'll be getting started with CI/CD strategies on top of AWS, Azure, GCP, and GitHub Actions. So here we are talking about CI/CD for AWS. So I'm not talking about CI/CD. Again, you to go ahead and work as DevOps engineer. No, how we adapt this CI/CD for AWS. So again, so let's say from module number 3 is where hands-on starts. Every module from module number 3 would be hands-on. So module number 4. So this is where we'll be getting started with understanding the complete AWS DevOps tools, understanding code pipelines, code build, code deploy, and building a complete end-to-end DevOps pipelines here to get started. So then comes, we are talking about GCP DevOps. We'll be exploring all the GCP tools like Cloud Run, Cloud Build, Cloud Deploy, Artifact Registry, and building a complete end-to-end DevOps pipelines to understand how those tools work. Similarly, getting started with Azure DevOps, understanding all the DevOps tools like understanding boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, and using the concept of infrastructure as a code on top of Azure DevOps and getting started with ML pipelines, right? So here comes Azure DevOps pipelines as well. So getting started with that. So then comes GitHub Actions, right? So getting started with GitHub Actions, right? Using, let's say, not the cloud-based tool, open source tool, and getting started with building a complete end-to-end end-to-end DevOps pipelines by using GitHub Actions as well. So then comes module number 5. So module number 5 is, this is where we'll be diving into the world of Dockers and Kubernetes. So Dockers are everywhere, right? So we'll be getting started with Dockers and Kubernetes for MLOps. Okay, that's what the important scenario is here. So we'll be getting started with Docker's, understanding the foundations, talking about different Docker commands, understanding what is Docker registries, Docker hub it is, and let's say talking about what is this Docker daemon. So talking about Docker network types, Docker compass, and here comes various different projects. There are assignments as well. Yes, we'll be getting started with learning how to Dockerize a software, how to Dockerize a machine learning model, how to work with a Docker compass to build end-to-end machine learning pipelines as well. So then comes getting started with Kubernetes. Kubernetes for MLOps. Understanding complete the world of Kubernetes, right? Then understanding different components of Kubernetes, understanding what is this worker node, what is this something called control plane. Then understanding Kubernetes resources, right? And where we deploy these models, right? So we understand all these Kubernetes resources. And yes, so here we go. We will be going ahead and building a complete, deploying a machine learning models on top of Kubernetes clusters as well. So then comes a module number 6. We do have multiple modules for Dockers and Kubernetes. Module number 6 is again Kubernetes deployment strategy. So here when it comes to Kubernetes deployment strategy, so here we will be working on any other cloud platforms. Let's say we'll be picking AWS EKS or AKS, right? I'm sorry. So AWS has EKS, Azure has AKS, GCP has GKE. We'll be using any cloud-based Kubernetes infrastructure. So we'll be going ahead and deploying this Kubernetes on top of this cloud managed Kubernetes infrastructure, right? Where we deploy the models. Module number 7, the very important module. I will say every module is the important module, but module number 7, this is where we explore open source tools as well and cloud source tools. This is where we'll be getting started with, let's say, understanding data versioning, code versioning, experiment tracking, how to use model registries, getting started with model monitoring, and as well as infrastructure as a code for MLOps. So this is where we'll be getting started with AWS CDK. I did mention about CDK, which stands for Cloud Deployment Kit. So how to use this CDK to deploy the infrastructure on top of AWS. We'll be building one in a project where you can go ahead and deploy this infrastructure on top of AWS. Then comes, we will be talking about high-level overview of model management tools. So this is where we will be getting started with open source tools. Like I discussed about importance of MLflow. There are multiple projects in MLflow, right? So this is where we have, let's say we'll be getting started with MLflow, and we'll be learning how to go ahead and deploy the MLflow stack on a cloud. Then I will be using that MLflow stack that I deployed. I will be building, training, and deploying the models with that. Okay. So then comes, let's say we're talking about DVC, data versioning tool. We discussed about importance of versioning a data. We'll be getting started with open source tool and understanding how to use DVC CLI and getting started with versioning the data on the cloud, right? So then comes module number 8. We do have a dedicated module for feature stores. We discussed about feature stores. So here we'll be discussing about various different feature store options, like feature store on top of AWS SageMaker, Vertex AI, let's say Databricks, Tecton, Feast, HubSpot. So here we'll be using this Feast, a very famous open source feature store. We'll be building our own feature store. A feature store has 2 feature stores. There is something called offline, there is online. What is that? I will be discussing that during the program. Okay, saying that, we are arriving to module number 9. So if you call someone as a beast, module number 9 is a beast. So module number 9, this is where we build what we call it as this level 4 architecture projects. So we will be getting started with Amazon SageMaker, understanding all the different components of Amazon SageMaker, right? So then comes, we will be building what we call it as Amazon SageMaker pipelines. So this pipeline that, which I'm showing you a demonstration. So we'll be building it for 15 hours, somewhere near to 10 to 15 hours. So this is where we'll be building this level 4 architecture project. We'll be deploying this end-to-end MLOps pipelines using Amazon SageMaker. And then comes, here comes the GCP Vertex AI. So we'll be getting started with Vertex AI, similar to how we started with Amazon SageMaker. So we'll be exploring all the different components of Vertex AI, and we'll be going ahead and building this complete end-to-end MLOps pipelines on Vertex AI. So then comes Azure, like Azure MLOps. So we'll be getting started with Azure Machine Learning Studio, similar to Amazon SageMaker and Vertex AI. So we'll be getting started with building an end-to-end MLOps version 2 pipelines. We'll be using a latest SDK, right? So then comes module number 10. We will be focusing on the open source tool, Kubeflow. So Kubeflow, which is again followed by Kubernetes. So Kubeflow is a framework that runs on Kubernetes, which is a followed by module. So we'll be exploring, let's say if an organization, they don't want to use cloud-based tools like AWS, they don't want to use Azure or GCP, they want to go for open source. So those organizations, they use Kubeflow. So here we'll be learning how to deploy the Kubeflow stack, step number one, then going ahead and creating the end-to-end ML pipelines on top of it. Awesome, right? So then comes, if I scroll down, we do have a new edition, the module number 11. So this is where we'll be getting started with ML ops for LLMs, or what we call it as LLM ops and Gen AI, right? So this is where we will be talking about the operation side. Let's say we discussed about the architecture previously in our demo. So how to get started and get started with responsible AI and how to go ahead and implement responsible AI. But we will be also talking about, let's say, how do you make your LLMs into the production, the four different pillars of how to get any Gen AI models to the production. We talk about what is RAG and let's say what is this RAG, our prompt engineering, our fine tuning, our trained model. And one of the hands-on that we do in this particular module, so getting started with responsible AI. So how to go ahead and implement guardrails or responsible AI, whatever the words, because we call it in different words. We use Amazon Bedrock and we implement guardrails. And we talk about other strategies like FMOps, what is this, LLM ops, and LLM ops pipelines. So then comes module number 12. This is where monitoring starts. So once we deploy the models, understanding model monitoring on every cloud, discussing about different model monitoring tools they offer. So here we pick any one of a cloud and we'll be getting started with implementing a complete end-to-end model monitoring as well as infrastructure monitoring that we're talking about, right? Okay, so then comes, here we have module number 13. So module number 13, what we're talking about, let's say commercial tools, right? So not limited to cloud or open source. Here we are talking about commercial tools as well. So we'll be also exploring the commercial tools. And in this module number 13, we'll be providing a demo because we don't ask you to do hands-on because commercial tools has to be paid some subscription, but there are free subscriptions you can also try. Yes. So then comes module number 14, post deployment challenges. So deploying the model, the job is not done. After deploying the model, what are the challenges that you face? So those things we discussed. Post deployment challenges, challenges related to software engineering, software challenges related to ML model deployment, for an example, right? So then comes, let's say we are talking about one project that we'll be building it here. So we are talking about using open source tools like Evidently AI for model monitoring, right? So then comes module number 15, right? Module number 15, let's say here we are talking about self-paced videos. Module number 15 is where we have, let's say this is basically a pre-recorded videos, because the topics that we cover in module number 15 will be the based on the topics that we already covered in till module number 14. So here we'll be getting started with Jenkins, right? Which is again part of CI/CD tools that we're talking about, right? So then we are talking about, let's say, let's say, one of the project again, which will be built by using Jenkins and end-to-end ML pipelines. So then we are talking about, let's say, Apache Airflow. There are multiple projects in Jenkins as well. So then we are talking about Apache Airflow. So Apache Airflow is again one of our open source tool that we'll be getting started. So when it comes to Apache Airflow, so we'll be discussing about how to use Apache Airflow to get started, talking about DAGs, Airflows, operators, and we'll be also building two different projects in Apache Airflow. So getting started with ETL data pipelines. So getting started with building end-to-end ML pipelines. So then already we explored Kubernetes above. So this is where we'll be getting started with, let's say, Kubernetes on top of GKE and Kubernetes on top of Azure, right? Perfect. So then comes, we'll be getting started with Terraform as well, right? So Terraform is, which is a tool again, which we will be using it for infrastructure as a code. We'll be getting started with Terraform and again, building two different projects, understanding how to get started with building an infrastructure on top of premises as well as AWS. Then final topic would be Argo workflow. So Argo workflow, which is again open source platform, which is on top of Kubernetes. We'll be getting started with that. So this is where we'll be again exploring how to get started with Argo workflow, integration that with Kubernetes, and building one end-to-end scheduled level 4 architecture project on top of Argo Workflow as well. And if I scroll down further, here you can able to check the skills that you're going to master in this particular program. So the skills that you can able to add to your resume and the tools that we're going to explore throughout this particular program. And if you scroll down further, yes, in the same PDF, you can able to check the same pricing details for both INR and USD. And if you scroll down further, you can able to get the explanations of each and every feature, what it offers, etc. And yes, so if you scroll down further, definitely the testimonials that I like. So definitely please take your time, listen to this particular testimonials, because our participants does talks about us, not us. Participants does talks about us, how they could able to reach their success. You can see like Karthik could able to crack not one, 6 different jobs, and he got the maximum hike of 121 percentage. So we are talking about somewhere between after completing a program within 45 days. So usually most of the working professionals who take a program, hardly they take 1 to 1.5 months to figure out the job. So please go ahead and check the testimonials of Karthik. Please do check the testimonials of Harsha. Check the testimonials of Balasubramani, Rohit for an example. So Rohit could able to crack the job in, let's say we are talking about in 15 days after completing a program. He could able to, he got, let's say we are talking about around 75% of a hike. And let's say Karthik, he could able to crack multiple jobs, and let's say he's now currently working on an organization called Tredence. So there are a lot of testimonials, talks only about the success of a program. So please go ahead and take a look. That's it. And if you scroll down further, you can see more and more testimonials. So with that, without wasting much of a time, so now let me just go ahead and let's say the reveal, the surprise that we are talking about. So let's get started. Perfect. So what do you mean by the surprise? The surprise, yes, the surprise is for a very limited persons only. Okay, finally, it's time to talk about the surprises. Okay, again, this what I'm talking about, the surprises are basically a special offers for the folks to register for this particular program. As I mentioned, the surprises. Surprises are always limited in this world, right? So yes, we are looking for offering the surprises are the offers for the next 10 seats, but we don't have 10 seats. So obviously we started this campaign almost a week ago. There are folks who already started registering for this particular program. So out of 10 seats, we do have only 5 seats left who is eligible for getting this offers, and this offers will automatically get closed on 11th of April. What are these offers? So obviously here is the thing. See, most of the working professionals, they would be interested to take advanced plan or advanced plus plan, because they get twice the chance to take a batch, and again a premium sort of support that I'm talking about. It can be 6 months or 1 year. See, are you someone who's looking for advanced plan? Perfect. Don't register for this. Yes, I say don't register for this. All you need to do is this, right? Simply go ahead and register for basic plan, which is costing around 45,999, and we will upgrade you to advanced plan, which is costing around 48,999. So that means you will be saving a registration fee for 3,000 rupees. So basically, advanced plan has been offered for 45,999. In the fee of basic, you get advanced. You simply go ahead and register for basic plan. We will upgrade you to advanced plan for free. And again, as I mentioned, these offers are currently open for 5 seats only. For the first 5 registrations, they're going to get this offer. And this will be available till 11th of April. Followed by that, are you someone who is interested to go ahead and register for advanced plus plan? So you get access to recordings of our previous batch immediately after completing a program in next 24 hours. You can get started with 1 year of premium support with twice the chance to take a batch. You want to register for advanced plus plan, but I say don't register for that. Simple. All you need to do, if you're someone who's looking for advanced plus plan, simply register for advanced plan, a middle one, which is costing around 48,999, and we will upgrade you to advanced plus plan for free. So you will be saving around 6,000 rupees on a registration. The logic is, in the fee of advance, you get advanced plus. And again, this is only strictly for 5 registrations only. And we will be closing this on 11th of April. And we do offer EMI on all the major credit cards. So you can get a minimum of 3 to max of 24 months EMI tenure. So you can go ahead and opt for that. So this is about the offer, awesome discounts that we do have. It's a first come first basis. So go ahead and get started with your registration. And please also do listen to our testimonials, because our participants are people who have attained the success. They talk about us, right? So please go ahead and look into these testimonials. These testimonials are available on a PDF that I shared. So look into the latest testimonials, all the testimonials that we do have. So we do have people's ranging from, as I mentioned, 2 to 3 years of experience candidates to, let's say we're talking about more than 15 to 20 plus years of experience candidate. There are candidates who even got placed in MLOps manager positions. So this this evaluates this program perfectly works fine for the people who have more than, let's say, 15 plus years of experience. So go ahead and listen to the testimonials of, let's say, Karthik, who got 6 different offers and 121% of hike. So go ahead and listen to the testimonials of Deepali, someone coming from the support background, completely a non-technical background, how we helped her to transform into MLOps. So go ahead and listen to the Harsha's testimonial. So go ahead and listen to, let's say, the Rohit testimonial. So, and yeah, testimonials talks about us. And again, as we're talking about Citron Technologies, why, I mean, you should definitely care, because we are there in this particular space more than a decade. And again, we are supported by Department of Science and Technology India, incubated in PSG STEP, funded by Nidhi EIR, and we represented ourselves into multiple stages. We work with corporates for corporate trainings and other, we have been part of AWS Activate program and been awarded as a best startup in, let's say, 2018. Yep. So go ahead and listen to all the testimonials and you will know what's the real benefit that we're adding for the peoples with that. So now let's get started with an official Q&A session. So please go ahead and unmute your mic right now. So let me just talk to you, ask million questions. I'm here to help you, right? So let me just help you with all the questions that you do have. Unmute your mic, ask your questions in a chat. So let's get started. Thank you.